Okay, well, so let's officially call us in. You ready?
So moved.
We're gonna start this meeting just a small bit late. I don't even bring an agenda. So if we can start by, there's one person here right now. Would you like to be recognized?
Two people.
Two people. You stuck in. Would you like to be recognized already?
Robert knows it.
Okay.
All you can say.
Okay. Welcome. And then I would take
You don't have Jane here.
a warrant. Jane is not
Jane
here.
is not here, okay.
You're on, Dave. And then, Mark, I'm wondering if you could clerk when Dave has to leave.
Yeah, well,
to
sure,
the
back me
end.
up on, because I know you take really good
Okay.
notes.
Okay, so then can we have a motion for the consent agenda?
Okay, so
The
moved.
warrants?
Second.
Any discussions? That also includes the minutes, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I think there might have been an error in the minutes. Is that what I found out earlier, where it said the wrong day, like March or May, and it's, I read this really quickly, but I thought it said some point where we were doing something in May and we were really in March. There, the administrative reports from the March 4th meeting, administrative reports, Green Street School, it says on May 23rd, the after-school running program will begin. Is that really right, or is it March?
No, no.
That was March.
Tulip Trust, the 2nd of May, running program 23rd of May. Well, the sequence using both Mays
Yeah, I would
makes
say
sense.
March.
Yeah,
I would
it
say
should be March.
Yeah,
Well, because everybody else started their running programs in March.
yeah. No, it's March.
What a good
So-
mud season activity.
They did, and they run on paper. So, sorry, before we actually approve the minutes, we'd have to make that,
Yes, March 23rd, that's what I have in my notes here.
okay. So, we make that adjustment to the minutes.
So what was the adjustment again?
That it's not under Green Street's report from the March 4th minutes. It's not, the running program starts in March, not in May. Okay, so any other discussion or vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And it's approved. And then Deb, we're going to skip right to you.
This will be very quick. EES did receive our 5-year funding award to conduct Head Start and Early Head Start, and that means that we're in the cycle of going through a cycle of reviews, and they start with document submission. So I have 2 documents for your perusal, and I've already distributed them. The first being a health and safety check that we are supposed to conduct within 45 days from the time that we received the award, which was March 1st. And that is, you have a summary of that site by site. And so there are boxes that say either yes or no. And there are some notations with numbers in the right-hand corner, and an explanation of those are on the last page, page 9. So this is intended to be a screening, and then from this we develop a plan for things that we don't feel were exactly in compliance. You will see that they are a few small things that just require, by and large, some revisiting with the staff. And there's one piece, number 5, that was not readily evident. And that is more about the fact that our health manager has been out on sick leave. So we will get back to that. We have, I think, another month to respond to that. So the most critical piece is to demonstrate that we did conduct the site-by-site health and safety inspection, which we did. And the other piece is the Head Start governance leadership piece. We have 60 calendar days to do that, but we've already done it. And that is the second document that you have. And those are my notes and my check marks. There isn't a requirement that a training for the board match this document. And there is very little here that you don't already know. My intention would be that when we have our joint policy council board meeting, I believe on June 3rd, we can really plan our policy council part of that program or that board meeting to include any training pieces that I think would be important to highlight. And we will also include a required piece that we just learned about yesterday, in that the board needs to be aware of the way that we select families and the criteria, and specifically how we verify the income qualifications or verifications for our families. So there's a brief overview that we are required to give you training on. So I think that piece, along with my intent to connect with new board members as they join, to really do a broader overview, meets all these requirements. This does require the board chair's signature along with mine, and then it gets uploaded in our program, the federal program.
And policy council actually went over this last night as well, so the parents and the staff and the outside community representatives have all gone through this just last night too.
Deb, when I was just looking at page 8, I'm seeing check marks on all the pages except for page 8.
Probably because I got tired.
Yeah.
Let's see. It's because page 7 and 8 are the same page.
Okay.
So you needed a vote from us, Deb, that we approve these, or what makes it official for the government?
I think that what makes it official is that it's documented in the minutes that you were made aware of this, and that it was signed by or will be signed by the board chair, and that any continuing pieces are part of the plan for the future.
You have all that, clerk? All set? And then Deb, do you want to tell the board, are we up and running in Westminster?
Thank you. We officially opened our new Early Head Start classroom in Westminster on Monday. We are fully enrolled. We have a family of 2 who are waiting to finish some of the enrollment pieces. But other than that, we have the other 6 children. 2 of the 3 teachers are hired. It's certainly fine with only 6 children. And we did have a little challenge with the well water issue. The way that we're going to address that is the same way that we're addressing it next door in our other building, and that is to provide bottled water for drinking purposes. The water levels, because it's well water, have high levels of lead. So we are dealing with that with the right steps. And we did have a bit of a glitch with the radiant floor that had to do with the sub-zero temperatures that we had that were really extraordinary this year. And we worked with the plumbing company to abate that, so all is well. It's just a beautiful space, great program. Families are very happy to be there, and when we have our 3rd teacher on board, we will be providing an open house.
And then I guess, as long as we're on Deb, the last thing from Policy Council to share with the board last night that's very exciting is the in-kind. The federal Head Start monies come with strings attached that we have to match with a certain percentage. And it's been a real challenge in the time that I've been on the board, at least, to find that. And there's been a solid push by the staff at EES this year to get that changed, and it paid out. So the in-kind was not such a scramble this year, and parents are more aware of what counts and how much their efforts at home are actually playing into the education of their kids. So it was really nice to see.
It was really nice.
And kudos to Brenda.
Yes.
Okay, so now Ron, is there anything else you want to do before we go in?
Yeah, I have two things. We have a new early ed partnership contract with the Little Red House, and that's Carriage Hill.
Yeah.
So it's an approved partnership, much like our others, so we would just have you take a look at this and then sign off on this.
That's badass.
That's what they do. Start back up.
And the other thing is the annual meeting warnings. We have 4 warnings, and just to divvy those up to board members. The
did
first
that,
one,
didn't you?
oh, did you already do
I
that?
thought I had that from last meeting.
And it was doing what?
With this?
Well, the first one is to authorize the pay for the director's stipends.
You have that for everybody or one hand?
I just have one copy.
So what he's talking about here, Todd and Kim, maybe you remember from last year, is that during the town meeting, to say as a board member and introduce a specific.
And actually, the warnings are probably, well, I know they're listed in
In our book.
somewhere in the book.
Before we jump in there, Jill, am I supposed to sign this, or you, the Little Red House?
Does it say clerk or?
I think Jill said.
I think it would be the chair.
Do you know what page this?
Yeah, it's on the book.
I have warnings right here. Is this it?
Page 7.
6 and 7. Not that, not down here. So page 7 at the very bottom, Article 1, 2. So the first one's on salaries. Who would like to do that, to pay ourselves? Give that to Todd, as the new person.
New guy gets the money? What was that about?
You're gonna stand up at, somebody stands up at town meeting and says, and reads this article and then sits down. That's really it.
Okay.
So we traditionally divvy it out amongst ourselves before we get there, so we look organized and.
And the moderator will ask, he'll know the names and he'll call on you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. and he'll meet.
That's right.
You gonna do that again this
Ron
year?
gives us cards too. Todd.
Robert, yeah, we get little
He gives us a crib
cards.
sheet.
So anyway,
Those are visual aids.
So you want me to do number one?
Well, knowing that
Not
we have 4 to
necessarily,
do, and we have 4 current members as opposed to 1 new member, I would maybe advocate that somebody else,
all right, I was
Do the-
joking more.
You want me to jump in and take it?
that would be great, Mark.
Yes.
Oh, sure, I volunteer.
Okay, the next one
Is that all
deals
right?
with
That's fine.
the ability to borrow money pending receipt of taxes.
Kim, want that?
Whatever, it's fine.
Kim? Okay. The third one is to accept and expend categorical grants from the state and federal government.
Todd, take that.
Todd's doing it.
Sure.
David?
Todd's got that.
Todd?
Todd, David's got lots to do.
No, I don't. But that's okay.
Well, the last one is,
Things for the board?
the last one is the budget article, and I'm assuming you would do
Well, what
that.
about the act on the auditor's report?
These are the only ones that I have.
5?
If
Yeah,
you,
that's
there's
for the,
5 and 6.
Yeah.
It's for town and schools, so I think the chair.
Town and town school district,
Yeah.
so it goes over to the select board?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, boss, do we have a 7? Is there, because usually there's been enough to go around.
All right, then Todd, you don't have to do anything, and David can do Article 3.
Okay.
I really want to do number 3.
You did?
Well, you guys can fight over it that
Yeah,
day.
you can do that.
And then I'll do Article 4.
Authorize accepting money from the tax levy. That's it. Everybody gets that.
Okay?
Okay, thank you. And then I do have a contractual matter that I'd like to go into executive session. And we could,
We've specifically stated contractual matter, that's all we have to do, right? So we could go down to a staff room, we could leave stuff here,
Yeah.
come back,
sure.
so we'll be back.
I'll give this back to you.
So I need-
Well, actually,
At this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Each town has a charter, including Brattleboro has its own set of...
So moved. Well, you want-
I'm going to entertain what you said.
You want me to put that into words? Okay, I move that the board accept the arrangements that were negotiated between the town of Brattleboro School Board and the, fill in the blank.
Yeah, I would say the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union and the Wyndham Southeast Education Association to extend
Okay.
the contract by 2 years.
Okay, we're extending basically the contract that's currently in place by 2 years.
Second.
I abstain.
Not yet, but you will.
oh, who seconded it, Jill?
I did.
Oh,
Kim.
okay.
All right, any other discussion? And so at this point, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions?
I abstain.
Or recusing himself because he has a wife who's an employee? Okay.
So if you could sign this.
Abstain because it's-
All right. So we're going to, anything else that we need for our meeting, Ron?
Frank is going to give you a brief update on the energy project, the heating project, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're making good
This is the
progress.
boiler project?
The pellet boiler project is, expect to have the bid package available this week. An advertisement will go out probably tomorrow. It's being coordinated by Stevens and Associates and Kohler Lewis, mechanical design engineers. The review, as we discussed with the Energy Committee, was to make sure we address the issues that we had seen in the control segment of the project. Control meaning the interior HVAC, those unit ventilators that provide the comfort and air quality for the learning environment, and then the control around the boiler to come on and burn wood or not, to go into an idle. So those issues have been considered carefully, and we're confident that we're going to have a good bid package, and we are much earlier than the previous cycle. So I have gotten interested parties contacting us as well. I'm referring them to the bid process. So tentatively, I would expect at the end of this week to have a firm bid opening date. The tentative date is April 13th, but that's to be confirmed. So
And then bids would be back in,
we would open bids on the 13th of April, and we would want to have a committee meeting to review and award as quickly as we could, you know, and we rely heavily on Kohler Lewis and Stephen Associates to evaluate that they're qualified bids. But
and work is going to be done in July.
right, probably some preliminary work in June, but most of the work would be in July. But by awarding a bid in April, we'll get purchase orders going, we'll get the inventory on site, and the job will be staged and ready to go. Any questions?
I just want to add that one of the more significant things coming out of that meeting was the realization that the cost of the control systems and the maintenance thereof is something that needs to be looked at more carefully than it had been in years past. So that's going to be a big consideration going forward with the entire project. And I think everybody is cognizant of that, and it'll be reflected in the bid process. All right.
Yep.
Anything else? Ron was here.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure, why not?
How is the financing being arranged for that project?
Last year at the town meeting, there was a vote to fund the project. It was a $375,000 special article. I think it was Article 27. And so it was passed. A bid process ensued last spring. But the bids, there was only one bidder, and it was rejected because it was insufficient resources to fund that bid. So this is the second round. We're also hoping that the Clean Energy Development funding that's part of the Vermont Yankee close will become available for these biofuel projects. So I've been in touch with the Public Service Board. There's an administrator that's arranging and organizing access to the funding. So there's not a clear path on how to access that at this point, but they know we're ready to move, and we're very interested in applying for the resources. And that sort of goes back to what Mark was saying. We know that this is really solving the fuel source issue, where we have a boiler, an oil-fired boiler that's met its useful life and it needs to be replaced. But this project doesn't upgrade the control systems throughout the building that control the heater, ventilators, the exhaust air, the various valves and so on. So that's another project that we need to evaluate.
Okay, so then I think we'll move on in our normal agenda and get a couple other administrative reports from the principals. I think, Mark, you're on first from Green Street.
Okay, so at Green we have been preparing for upcoming SBAC assessments, training our students how to access the technology and navigate these upcoming assessments. And we'll be doing that starting in April for about a month and a half in grades 3 through 6. We have an arts night coming up on April 15th, fast approaching. So our hallways are really looking great with artwork, and we do a lot of after-school programs in the arts. So we're trying to organize quite an array of different arts on April 15th. We are a PBIS school, so we have earned our 4th all-school celebration. Friday, our committee will be putting the finishing touches on our next celebration, and that will be happening in 2 weeks. So. And then the 4th thing that we've been working on is literacy development. We're starting up a literacy task force with representatives from K through 6, and we're going to meet, we kind of backward planned 5 meetings from now till June, where we're assessing our literacy programs, our structure of our schedule, and putting that in place to assess where we are and make decisions for next year.
Jen.
So at Oak Grove, we are actually also practicing for the SBAC in that we are testing our broadband capacity and how many computers we can run at the same time. There's been some problems at the state level that have not been able to let us try our practice, so it's good that we have some time. Basically, we went to access everything, and an entire grade level wasn't available. So we're working on it.
Does that happen because too many people are doing it at the same time?
Nope, it's a glitch at the SBAC people out there, and they said it's not our problem. I think our broadband is okay. Gary Parzik says it is, but it is a capacity issue at their level. So we're figuring it out. It's good to have time. And again, our focus has really been on exposing the kids to the test itself in order to relieve anxiety and not have to be worried about the test itself, but know how to do things like highlight on their computer, use the online calculator, things like that. So that's more what we're focused on. On the staff level, yesterday our staff had Andy Kelly from EAP come and do a compassion fatigue, I'd call it a workshop, but we'll call it a facilitated discussion, because one charges you money and one is his volunteer work, so we had a facilitated discussion. But it was really great. He spent an hour with our staff and really identified some of the things that can cause stress for teachers, really about some of our challenges that our families face, and us as educators and caregivers that are trying to take on and correct. So we spent a good hour with him identifying those things and then working on self-care plans and community building amongst the staff for making partnerships to make that better. That's really, that's my brief report for tonight. Okay.
So Andy, brief administrative report from McKenna.
Brief.
You could use the microphone if you like.
Yeah, you got a mic all set up. So, we are about to embark on our new assessment, the SBAC, and next week we start with fourth graders. So we're doing fourth, then third, then fifth, and sixth. So between, we'll start next week, and then we'll be doing SBAC with one grade or another between now and the first week of June.
That's your brief report, that's really good. We're teasing him because that's not normally in his length of report.
Just take what you can get.
So the other thing I'd just like to report, and I'll have Lyle and Paul and Shelley maybe speak to it, but we've been having grade level meetings last week and this week, and probably one following week. So a chance always to have grade level teachers get together and then talk about particular issues that are of significant importance during this time. One being the whole Smarter Balance assessment process, and Paul's done a great job getting some direct information to teachers on that, answering questions, and doing some practice work about the technology involved with that.
Yeah, putting teachers in the position of students, logging into the test, seeing how that works, and then also seeing how the test administration software works.
Shelley's done a great piece on behavior intervention and behavior support with teachers. Maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah, I spent, we've got 2 more grade levels to do, but I've presented for the first hour or so at grade level meeting, just kind of doing an introduction about classroom management and evidence-based practice in classroom management techniques for classroom teachers, and talking about elements of applied behavior analysis in the classroom, reinforcement and punishment, and just trying to give classroom teachers a deeper understanding of those principles and how they can apply them in their everyday use with children. And the response, I feel it's generated a lot of really great questions and good discussion. And so I've found it very enjoyable, and hopefully the teachers have gotten a lot out of it as well.
The feedback for Shelley's session has been phenomenal. Everybody wants to have her come back and do some more work with us in the fall, so it's been great.
Good.
Do you want me to talk a little bit?
Yeah.
So we've also had Brian Bittner do some calibration with each grade level. We feel like it's really important every year that we're ensuring that we're pretty closely scoring our screenings the same, and I think we've been pretty close with every grade level.
Indeed.
Yeah. So that's good. We've done just a quick review of the educator quality standards and some of the changes in Vermont education law and how it's going to impact K-6. Any of you that have looked at that know that it has some huge impacts for 7-12, but there are some impacts for K-6 as well. We've spent time on social studies. It's the first time in years that we've really looked at what we're teaching for social studies and really focusing on some common units across the SU. There's so much moving back and forth among schools that we really have to ensure that we're pretty tight on a lot of the units that we're teaching now. So we've been working on that. And then Michaela Sims, the WSESU diversity coordinator, has come in and done some work around poverty, and actually it's been a pretty interesting activity. Each group of teachers is given a budget, and she's given them some guidelines, anywhere from you work 40 hours a week, you're making minimum wage, you have 2 children, to different guidelines for each group. And then she's gone around and given them what she's called wild cards, which is you had 2 flat tires you have to replace, it's going to cost this much. How are you going to fit that into your budget? So that teachers have a better sense of, here's what it's like to really live at or below the poverty line in this area. So that's been really very well received as well.
Jill, a couple of things. I don't know if people have heard about, but yesterday, Liz Howard reported that the State Board of Ed has decided not to use the SBAC for measuring average yearly progress this year. Just not going to do it. Sort of an interesting development.
Yeah.
And the other thing is with all of the grade level meetings and things, do you do formal assessments and gather data or responses from the staff and do through that process? Could we see those reports at some point and see how, not this minute, but.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a reason why not.
Yeah, I mean, professional development is really important, so it'd be nice to see that, some data on that.
So we want to make a transition to do a demonstration. Andy Davis has something?
So yeah, welcome to our meeting. Some of you guys are probably thinking, what the heck is SBAC? What is all this? Well, there's a lot of acronyms that are being discussed up here. But from here on out, we will be more cognitive of that and not using them so much as we transition to the part where we wanted to present to all of you that have come. Thanks for coming. The budget and some information about our schools. So the first thing that we have is Andy Davis. Where is he?
He's in room, he's in room 133, and he wants to invite everybody down. He's got a display, and if
Which way is
Andy's got a display,
133?
probably we're seeing.
Which way is that, Dave?
Well, if you go this way, you can grab a cookie
That's what I was thinking.
and a drink.
Cookies and drinks.
And a drink.
And then by about 6:30 or so, we'll be back here and start on the actual discussion for the budget.
Hey, everybody.
Got a few more coming, I think.
I know some years there's like more displays from different projects, but I'm Andy Davis. I teach music at Green Street and at Oak Grove, and I have an after-school drama club, and I know drama has been in the news a lot because of this new project with NEYT. There's been a town-wide, I don't know if any of you went down to see the Jack and the Devil's Three Golden Hairs. It was a kid signed up and did it after school. But we've been doing a drama club after school at Oak Grove School for many, many years. Here's if anyone wants to flip through here. This is just a history of our plays with all the cast photos and scripts. And here's a DVD of our latest production. And we were just talking about all the nuts and bolts of how you actually put on a show, especially with very limited time afterwards. It's funded by Brattleboro Elementary Enrichment, which is known as BEEP. Are any of you familiar with that? They fund various after-school enrichment. There's stuff here at all three schools. And I had 16 kids. Oak Grove is a pretty small school, but there were 16 kids in grades 4, 5, and 6 that worked from January to March and put on a musical. And we've been doing it for 10 years, and the kids all get a DVD of the show afterwards, and cast photo. And one question that I answered earlier was, do these kids continue? Some of these kids show up. Some of them were in Greece recently at the high school. So some of them get their start in drama. So that's basically the short script. I'm a big proponent of, I think the NEYT thing was fantastic. I don't know how many of you were familiar with that. I know the administrators were because they're very supportive of it. But for example, we had 3 kids from Oak Grove who did that, which was great. And 2 of them did this show too because they love theater so much. And they overlapped. So for a while, I had 2 kids that were doing theater 3 afternoons a week, okay? They will probably definitely be on the stage at BUHS eventually, or NEYT. But I'm a big fan of the school play because you get a higher percentage of kids who will do it right in their school, for their classmates, for their school. But I'm completely supportive of NEYT, and Stephen Stearns and I have had quite a few conversations about how to make this school-based program kind of tie in with the NEY townwide program. But this has affected a lot of kids over the years. We have anywhere from 15 to 20 kids in it every year who do 1 to 2 rehearsals a week for 2 months and then put on a musical.
And do you do it for the school itself during school hours?
We do 3 performances. We do 2, I use town meeting day to do a 3-hour morning dress rehearsal. We go through the whole show twice because there's nobody in the building on town meeting day. It's very convenient. And then on Wednesday, we do a morning show and an afternoon show for the school. Teachers can sign up for which show they come to. And some years we've had classes come over from other schools in the high school. And then we do 1 evening show the following day for parents. So anyway, thank you all for coming. If you have any questions or you want to see any of the materials I just brought, we also have at Oak Grove an intergenerational chorus that's meeting. If any of you like to sing, we just started last week. My school chorus sings with adult volunteers. Another thing that's been going on for over a decade, and we sing at nursing homes and schools, and this year at the district chorus night. So a lot of arts going on.
Welcome to our meeting here tonight and our presentations for you about the budget and what's going on in our schools. There is a clipboard. Somebody have it? And so if everyone could please make an effort to sign in, that'd be helpful. So I wanted to start tonight, I'm the chair of the school board, Jill Stahl-Tyler. Just wanted to start tonight by welcoming you and then explaining just a bit about our budget process this year. We begin this budget process really right after school starts, back in the fall. And then we have an eye towards the budget all the time with all the presentations, the reports we hear from the administration all the way throughout the year. And of course, then we also hear from neighbors and friends, just like you folks do, about any high taxes or any increases or any complaints they have of the schools, and occasionally we hear some positive things too. So we started our budget process this year by telling the administrators we thought it'd be great to have a budget that's no higher than last year, that would be level funded. Now, the very idea of level funding, it's taken me a while to understand this up here, but some of you are town reps and understand it for a lot longer. It means that there's some cuts that surely have to be made just to level fund, because a lot of the items in the budget go up annually. Things like a teacher's negotiated salary as they gain more experience, the cost of supplies, and health insurance. Health insurance rates alone for this year's budget are up by 4.5%. But that's actually a lot better than it was a few years ago in 2013, when just the health insurance rate was up by 10%. So the administrators questioned us back and said, so do you want level service? Do you want level funded? And we said, no, please, not level service. We want level funded budget to try to minimize the tax impact to the community. Of course, that said, we said the 0 increase in taxes would be our ideal. And we hedged a little bit because we also say to them, we want to hear from the administration. Is there something that clearly needs to be done? And that's their professional opinion that certainly has a lot of value. Still, we said to them, we're hoping for a 0 increase. So the administrators exceeded our request. They came back with a budget that's actually lower than previous year's budget. And it still delivers all the programs the parents and the students expect here in our town. Things like vocal and instrumental music, arts, foreign languages, and after-school programming. Personally, I was thrilled. A few weeks later, though, our business director, Frank, came in with some thoughts about our ideas on taking some money from the reserve fund in order to make that happen. And he pointed out that reserves can be spent really quickly with some unexpected expenses. And this is probably no huge surprise, but just this past month alone, we spent $25,000 on removing snow from the roofs and the campuses that wasn't exactly in our anticipated expenses. So $25,000 one month, just snow. And there's lots of other things, of course, that could jump in there. So Frank strongly recommended that we not spend down the reserve. We had a lively discussion up here about that. It's a similar discussion that I think we all have within our families when we try to decide on how much we're going to spend or how much we want to save. In the end, we as a board decided to listen to Frank's strong suggestion. We did not take from the reserve in order to help adjust the tax rate downward. So back to the overall budget. We were still able to maintain our decrease of 0.36%, about a third of 1%. It's not a lot of money, but it is lower. That's a decrease in the budget for our schools. Of course, there's one last part of this budget process. Before we wore ourselves out with our hands patting ourselves in the back, Frank walked us through the data of how the state calculates our total school tax rate. He'll highlight this information as we review the budget, and you'll soon see that those numbers are out of our control at the local level. And the result is a 2.6 increase overall in our taxes. This comes out to $44 of an increase in taxes on a $100,000 house for a family with no income sensitivity. Now, I think I speak for all of us when I say that I thought this was not too bad. But by the way, we also all looked again at that total budget. We've heard you, all the town reps in the meetings. So we looked again and we asked ourselves, what does it take to get to that 0% in increase in taxes for the town taxpayer? And we didn't like the answer, those of us sitting up here. And I'm willing to bet, I have written down here, and neither would you, it's been pointed out, that's presumptuous. I don't know what you all think. I'm willing to bet that you wouldn't if you saw what it meant. It meant massive cuts, not just in areas of programming that people like to throw around and say, oh, this is something that's not really necessary, but massive cuts all the way down through teachers and programs. The only way to find that much money would make a difference, we feel, in how well students learn. And we sit up here listening every 2 weeks to the administrator showing us what they're doing that leads to the results that they're also going to show us. And after all, the reason that we have schools is to educate the kids. That's the result we're trying to get to, right? So there's one more area I'd like to bring to your attention, because what I wrote in the town report seems to be directly contradicted by the data. I said that we're seeing an increase in student numbers, and I'd like to explain where that student number comes from. Overall enrollment has declined in Brattleboro, along with the rest of the state. In 2013, K through grade 6 enrollment stood at 756. This year it's 724. So it is down. But the equalized student count went from 789 in 2013 to 821 in 2016. So what's going on? Well, equalized student is a term defined by the state legislature. It's adjust actual enrollment to reflect pre-kindergarten students and students in poverty and English language learners. The idea is to have a number that more adequately reflects the true needs of all of our students. Now, the other day, my son, who's a sophomore, one of my sons, accused me of being very naive. I think if any of you have teenagers, you might be getting some accusations as well. Mine was that I was naive and that I believed that Brattleboro is a happy little town with no problems. Now, while I suppose we could all have a conversation about optimism and realities and which approach is best in parenting our children, all of us here know that there are challenges in our community. Our town schools now stand at 61% for free and reduced lunch at Academy, 57% at Oak Grove, and 70% at Green Street. That's a dramatically different number than it was 5, 6, definitely 10 years ago. A very sad number that we've also started to track and asked as board that we hear about is how many kids in our elementary school are homeless. And there's 15 at the last count. We ask for that every month. We see it, the number goes up and down, but last month was 15. And our early education services personnel inform us that a high percentage of challenges are in our families that are dealing with poverty, homelessness, and other related family issues. But now lest we all sink into gloom and doom, there are good things to report here, which you'll hear from the administrators tonight. We continue to watch all of our kids' reading levels increase, all of our students become more proficient in math, and to chip away at the differences between the cohort groups of those that are on free and reduced lunch status and those who are not. Best of all, to me as a mom, and surely to all of us as town representatives, we have not achieved less differences in these groups because we're pulling everybody's scores down, which has happened in other schools around the nation. But rather here, we're raising everybody's scores up. This doesn't happen everywhere. I believe, and this board believes, that we do a great job at educating our kids here in this town. I think I likely bore some people with my enthusiasm for the good things that I see coming out of our EES program in our elementary schools. I think our tax money is being invested well. As a chair, I speak for all of us, and I did run all of this by them to make sure, in saying that we feel this budget is fair and good for our town, and that the budget we've presented deserves your support on Saturday, when we all vote. So I open with that, and then I pass off to some very capable people. The more I work with the board on these years, the more I'm impressed with the quality and the professionalism and also the passion that these guys bring to their jobs. So, passing it off.
Okay. So maybe we can just introduce ourselves across the table before I speak a little bit. Deb?
So I'm Deborah Gass, the Executive Director of Early Education Services.
I'm David Scholes, clerk of the school board and the select board.
I'm Todd Rhodes. I'm a new member of the school board.
I'm Kimberly Price, and I'm a school board member.
Mark Truhan, vice of the school board.
Ron Staley, superintendent of schools.
Frank Rucker, business administrator.
Jen McCusick, principal at Oak Grove Elementary.
Mark Spino, principal at Green Street School.
Andy Pachuli, principal here at Academy.
Keep going.
Lyle Holiday, curriculum coordinator for Wyndham Southeast.
I'm Shelley Wilson, elementary special education coordinator for our district.
I'm Brian Bittner, I'm the literacy coach for the district.
Jen O'Neill, assistant principal, Academy School.
Paul Smith, curriculum coordinator, Central Office.
So what we wanted to do is give you a brief overview of school achievement results and student outcomes, student achievement data. So we're going to do this on a PowerPoint. Okay. I did that. So thanks for being here tonight. We can move this along. Yeah. Okay, so what we'd like to do is give you a little background about the schools, information about the free and reduced lunch program, early education services. We'd love to share some results from our annual parent survey. A couple of different people are going to give us some background on literacy and math data review. We'll talk a little bit about the behavior programs within the school. And I think as you heard if you were at the board meeting, a little bit about it's referred to as SBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment, and that relates to the Common Core and the assessment tied to the Common Core instruction. And then also to let you know how our students are feeling about their experience. So I'm going to turn it over to Shelley Wilson.
Very good, thank you. So I'm just going to do a few slides here at the beginning just about some demographic data for our town. As Jill mentioned in her presentation, this slide represents the free and reduced lunch rates in Brattleboro Town. This was taken from January, so I don't know if that Academy number has ticked up a little bit, but as of January 15th, the rates were 61% at Academy, 70% at Green Street, and 57% at Oak Grove. And the state average for free and reduced lunch rate as of last year, that's the most current data that we have, was 40.67%. Just as a comparison, I compiled this slide. I put up here some other towns in our area. For example, the first row there is the Brattleboro Town Elementary Schools. The total population, again, I compiled this in January, was 768 at that time, and the percent of free and reduced lunch was around 63%. As a comparison, I chose Springfield, Rutland City, and Bennington, and you can see in parentheses the Springfield data includes 2 elementary schools, the Rutland data includes 2 elementary schools, and the Bennington data includes 3 elementary schools. So I was just trying to provide some perspective of where other communities in our state are also coming out with their free and reduced lunch data. And so as you can see, we're at a higher percentage than Springfield, we're kind of on par with Bennington, and we're a little bit below Rutland City. Again, Jill mentioned this in her opening, but data on homeless students. This is a figure that fluctuates. In January, we had 17 homeless families. It sounds like that's gone down to 15. We've had a total of 32 families, K through 6 this year, who have been homeless at some point in the school year. And then that is, this data goes back to 2010 and shows you that homeless data is always changing. It was very high a few years ago at 42, went down, but now, as of last year, that figure is up again. Did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I think I think it's important when you think about the free and reduced numbers. That's kind of one of the standards for poverty that we are getting from the state based on our student population, and so it does have certain pressures in terms of the academic and behavioral program. So I didn't think we wanted to go through all of this point by point, but on the left-hand side you can see under the academic area some of the things that we really focus on. Highly qualified teachers, academic data meetings to make sure that the data that we're seeing from the classroom informs instruction. The teachers are looking at that and thinking about how does that change the way I'll instruct the lessons. Research-based instructional programs, we'll hear a little bit more about these from Brian Bittner and Paul Smith in our curriculum office. And then on the right-hand side, behavior supports, universal classroom behavioral expectations. Some of these check-in, check-out system are part of a positive behavior support intervention system that we've adopted. Planning rooms, school-based behavior specialists, paraeducators, really important to support our students with these professionals and paraprofessionals. And then, again, research-based behavior collection system and behavior data meetings, thinking about, so we're using the academic information to drive our instruction. We ought also be looking at our behavioral indicators as well.
So a little bit more about the behavioral services that we have available here in the Brattleboro Town Elementary Schools. All 3 of the elementary schools have a behavior interventionist. So that's someone with a high level of professional expertise and training that is very useful to be a consultant to classroom teachers within the building and administration around children with significant behavior issues. 2 of the elementary schools have what we call STEP services. STEP is an inclusion model that was created about, I think this is year 6 at Academy School and year 2 at Green Street School. Of a model, it's an inclusion support for students, so there are, again, behavior interventionists and then paraeducators that have a higher level of training and expertise to help integrate students with behavioral challenges into general ed to the greatest extent possible. 2 of the elementary schools are PBIS schools that Ron mentioned. That stands for Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. Vermont, as a state, is encouraging schools and communities to embrace the PBIS model as a way to help students with all students, not just the ones with behavior issues, but for all. EES implements the PBI and support models. And all 3 town schools and EES do have paraeducator staff with specific training in positive behavior supports and interventions. So again, they are getting a higher level of training so that they can deal with kids with a more challenging behavior. And Deb is going to speak to us about the early ed services.
So this data comes from our annual program information report, and these represent information from the 2014 school year. In our Head Start program, we had 183 children last year, and of those 183 children or families, 36%.
You're a little hard to hear over here.
Okay. In Head Start last year, we had 183 children and families, and from that number, 36% of the families were homeless. So that's more than 1/3 of our families during the school year 2014 experienced homelessness. 29% of our families were headed by a single parent. 29% were employed. 51% fell below the federal poverty guidelines. 100% of our families are eligible for free and reduced school lunches. 26% of our families, of our parents, had no high school diploma, and 37% sought mental health support that we are aware of. On the early Head Start side, that is those children who are infants and toddlers, and last year we had 103 early Head Start students or children. 28% of those families were homeless. 64% were headed by a single parent. 37% were employed. 68% fell below the 100% federal poverty guideline. 39% had no high school diploma, and 49%, almost half, sought mental health support, the moms.
So one of the things that we do each year is find out from parents, ask parents, so how are we doing? And in this fall, we asked parents as they came to parent conferences. In the fall and in the spring, we have parent conferences. We gave them a survey and asked them to fill it out for us. It includes academics, a section on academics, which would be, is your child receiving academic support as needed? Is your child receiving a quality education? Is your child being challenged? Those are just examples. We have a section on safety. Does the school provide a safe, positive culture? Are students being taught core values around respect? Let's see. Community, a section on community. Do parents feel or families feel welcome when they come into the school? Is there a variety of opportunity for parents to be involved in their child's education? Communication. How are we communicating with the families in our schools? And are we being responsive to what parents are asking? And the last section is about facility and grounds. And do our facilities support programming? Are our playgrounds safe? Those are just examples of some questions. So this past year, actually every year, parents are asked to rate questions on a 1 to 4 scale. And you can see the average rating of all of the questions was a 3.62, which is pretty good, out of 4. So that was up from the 3.56. And from left to right, it's academic averages, communication, community, facility and grounds, safety. So the blue is last year, 2013. The orange is this year, in the fall of 2014. And you can see this graph shows that we rated higher in every category this year. So some things, because we're always looking for areas that we would like to work on. Parents are questioning the amount of homework. And the interesting thing is we had questions about some people's thinking that kids are getting too much homework, some people thinking kids aren't getting enough homework. So we still need some conversations around homework. Technology, and I'm certain there are lines in the budget for technology. Parents are concerned that we have enough technology for our students. Schools' facilities, adequately supporting programs. And clear core values and beliefs adopted by the schools. So these are areas, a sample of some areas that we're having conversations on. Areas where parents say we're doing particularly well. 3.6% average thought that their child is receiving a quality education. There are a variety of opportunities for parents and families to participate in their child's education. The schools are clean and well maintained. Parents feel welcome when they come in the school. And teachers are responsive to parental concerns and questions.
Lana?
Yes.
And I don't know if I didn't hear you say that the 3 on the scores is 1, 2, and 3, and the 3 means agree. So anything above a 3 is meaning that people agree that they're
absolutely.
So
it's a 4-point scale.
It's not like 4 is perfect and everything else is bad. 3 was agree, and then 4 was strongly agree. And 2 was kind of agree?
Disagree? 2 is maybe disagree, and, right, thank you. So 1 is strongly disagree, 2 is disagree, 3 is agree, and 4 is strongly agree. Literacy.
One question, please.
Yes,
What was the participation rate of the,
it was 25%.
so a quarter of the people who received the survey?
Yes.
Thank you.
One more question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you have socioeconomic data on the people who did
We do
fill out
not.
the survey?
No, we hand it to every parent as they come in, and we do get up pretty close to 100% participation in our parent conferences. So almost 100% of the parents are handed a survey at the parent conference. We urge them to fill it out before they leave, but tell them they can send it back in. A 25% return rate is actually very good. She would like you to stand over.
Yeah. I was just waiting for you to finish. I didn't want to go steal your spot. My name is Brian Bittner. I'm the literacy coach. I've had this job for about 6 years. And a literacy coach, my job, you might not have heard of that position before, but they're pretty common in school systems, is to help support classroom teachers with literacy instruction, to help organize and facilitate professional development. I run data meetings. I get to go to national literacy conferences and bring back all the good work that's being done at the national level and sort of help support and drive literacy instruction in the school. And since 2009, I'm just going to go over some of the results that we've realized through, I think, really 3 things. I think we've done really well in the last 6 years or so, in that we've sort of tightened up the professional development that we offer all of our teachers. And we've implemented newer and more refined assessment systems. So we have a really good systems in place for identifying kids that are at risk for experiencing academic failure very early, as early as the first few months of kindergarten. And we've implemented some more robust and research, some proven academic programs. And so I think getting kids to read by 3rd grade is pretty critical, because after 3rd grade, you start to experience a whole bunch of issues, often emotionally based, that pretty much your job when you come to school by 3rd grade is to learn how to read. And so we've seen a reduction of what I call the illiteracy rate of incoming 3rd graders from about 25% of our students to about 5% since 2009. And the way we measure that is using our state test. Those are kids who get a 1 on that test, which is little or no evidence of meeting grade level standards. So pretty proud of that. The work that we, this is district-wide. These are all 3 elementary schools. Let's see, am I pushing it right down here?
Probably at the point.
It's the one on the right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've seen literacy proficiency rates rise from about 60 to 80% of our students. I say there's still some room there. I'm thinking we can get to about 90%, but it's pretty good gains since 2009. Additionally, we've seen kids who are what we call proficient with distinction. So those are kids exceeding grade level expectations, rise from about 1 in 10 kids to 3 in 10 kids in that same period. So not only, I think as Jill mentioned, not only are we seeing kids who are more at risk, we're seeing fewer kids experiencing reading failure. We're also seeing more kids getting more advanced and proficient with reading. And we've seen, so those 3rd grade literacy rates rise from about 8% below the state average to 11% above the state average. And you might have heard in news reports that Vermont and Massachusetts are often considered some of the strongest states in the nation. And so our 3rd graders' literacy proficiency is 11% above the state average of Vermont. So maybe we could say we have some of the best schools in the entire state, if not the nation. So looking at 6th grade, Again, we've seen literacy rates go from about 70% to about 83% proficiency rates. We've seen very impressive, and I think sort of as kids work their way sort of top of the food chain, at least for the data we're collecting at the elementary level, we've seen sixth graders, their proficiency, who are proficient with distinction, from 13% to 40% for sixth graders. And this is something I'm particularly proud about, that students living in poverty gone from about 50% proficiency to about 70% proficiency. And so there's still room for improvement, but if you consider that, what the state's been able to do average, that this betters the state average by about 10% during the same time period, despite having 22% more children living in poverty than the state average. So about 40% poverty in the state, and about 62%. Is that about what you had? This was last year's data, so pretty close. And I think that was my last slide. So any questions about that? I mean, generally, we're doing a great job of identifying kids who are at risk early. We have highly trained, very qualified teachers to provide interventions, in addition to the great work that we do with all kids in our classroom. And it's been really great to be a part of this for the last 6 years.
I just have to add, you know, the fact that the early intervention helps us identify the students, and then the really formalized program that we have going on with all teachers is really helpful. Brian, Lyle, Paul Smith, who you'll hear from soon, really working very closely with our teachers, and our teachers embracing this. And you know, the fact that we've just said the poverty rate is 20% higher than, at least the free and reduced rate, higher than 20% higher than the Vermont average, and our scores are doing so well. Our student achievement is really doing great. So always room for improvement, but we're really proud of that.
And I think what you'll see later on in the presentation is not only are they doing better at reading, but we have very happy children too. So you can have both. I think it's critical.
Question?
Sort of an academic question, but have you done any score comparison with Buckland and Bennington, which are closer on the free and reduced lunch scale?
I have not.
Yeah.
Just the way the data gets reported to us, we have access to state averages, but not individual school district averages.
So, another question.
Yeah, and it's sort of a general question for everybody, and probably betraying my age. When my kids were in school, we had follow-through down at Canal Street, and two of the kind of core principles was, one, a really active involvement of parents. I mean, bringing them in, doing groups, having social workers go out. And in terms of helping kids with behavior, parents seem to me conspicuously absent. The other thing they had at follow through that seemed good was they made a real attempt to mix. I mean, it was a magnet school, so that you had kids who were below the poverty, but they made a real attempt to get kids from the other end of the scale in the program as well. And it sounded like, at least from what I heard, there wasn't that kind of mixing now. I mean,
no, it actually is very similar.
At least in terms
large
of
scale.
Head Start, it sounded like was all.
But so the follow-through classrooms, I know specifically because when we moved to town in '93, our second grade son was in a follow-through classroom. We're saying, so what does that mean? We have a problem here? No, it was the integration of you know, the kids that have some deficiencies with a very integrated classroom setting with peers of all different abilities, and using really the principles that we've adopted since then to have an impact on the general population, not just the you know, making sure that the high achieving students have enrichment activities to exceed their, you know, to continue at their potential, and also make sure that the kids that need more remediation have that. And we do that within a classroom, and it might be some small group pullout. It might be a special educator with an academic support teacher and a paraeducator taking small groups within a class, working on those students and bringing them back into the class. So those are some of the fundamental principles that we learned from that federal grant, the follow-through classroom. So I think we've kind of institutionalized it in Brattleboro, which is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question. We saw some information about the demographics of the Head Start families. I was wondering how that compared with the demographics of the student body families as a whole.
Well, all of the Head Start families do filter into the Brattleboro Town School District, and those statistics are for Windham County, but we predominantly serve the highest number of families coming from the Brattleboro Town. And Head Start is by federal mandate required to take the lowest income families first. So we have the highest concentrated numbers of low-income families, but they all filter into the Brattleboro Town schools.
Well, I was wondering, for example, about the information about the parents, about who was a single family, who was had a high school education, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So your question is?
My question is that different from the population as a whole?
Yes. So those are pretty extreme numbers, and then it gets melded into different numbers for the general population. Yeah. And I don't have access to that right now, but if I look back at those slides and said, you know, such and such percentage are without a high school degree, diploma, you know, the general population is much higher than that. You know, I think the scale that we get from the state is mothers that have graduated from college, that sort of thing, and a very high percentage. So it's kind of a mix.
And the hope is that when families are in early education services, they can potentially be with us for 5 years. They can start from the time that mom is pregnant, and then the children graduate into kindergarten. So the hope also is that during that time, we might impact some of those statistics in a positive way. The data that you saw was a picture in time, but hopefully we are having a positive impact on that.
I'm surprised and actually really shocked by the numbers of children in our system who are homeless or members of homeless families. And it's almost embarrassing because I'm thinking, when I think of homelessness in our community, I don't think of young children very much. And I'm surprised at myself not realizing there are so many homeless children in this community. And I can imagine how difficult it is to educate or help to educate children whose families are in such crisis, you know, that they don't have a place to sleep at night. You know, the role that parents play in educating the children is great, and to be in that kind of crisis situation, it must be incredibly difficult for the children and for you to teach them. It's just a surprise to me, and it's really sad. I don't know what to say more than that. I'm just very surprised there are that numbers of children who are homeless in our community.
Two things. One, for the literacy, because I'd like to get an example of some of the professional development in literacy that's been going on. And then also, a lot of acronyms were thrown around at the beginning and actually throughout the presentation with very little description as to what all of those things mean. And I'm pretty sure there's other people in this room that would like to know what those things mean in more detail than just hearing the name of it as a system, whatever it is, what the behavior thing, whatever, you know, all of those acronyms, I'd like to get more of a description as to what all of those things mean.
I was just curious if your homelessness figures include families who are tenuously or unstably housed, or if it's figures who are actively homeless in that point in time.
the 14 or 17 that we identify are actively homeless.
So that doesn't include folks living at Morningside Shelter or living in homeless?
It doesn't.
It does include Morningside Shelter, but not folks who are on risk of eviction or?
No.
Okay.
No.
So there's more
Yeah.
people than that number who are dealing with the crisis?
Yeah, and I think Deb Gass's numbers from Early Ed Services kind of highlight that.
Yeah.
And those are as reported to us.
Right.
So we know there are actually, there could be more families
Right.
who, for a reason, don't necessarily share that with us
Right.
because, they may be embarrassed about being homeless. And so we may not know.
So it's a minimum number at best?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's safe to say.
I don't know if we addressed Dora's question.
No, you didn't.
I
I'm
think.
gonna get her glossary of all the terms.
It's the one that
No,
you're talking
I
about,
apologize,
the
but it would be
PBIS.
difficult for us to go back now and.
Right, I'm just wondering if there was one specifically that.
Well, I mean, I think the behavior one was probably the one that was the most sort of unexplained, but there were several acronyms in that in that beginning presentation. It was sort of just brushing over to saying this is what we do, and I don't think most people in this room know really what those things are. But the other one was the examples of professional development in literacy.
So those, Dora, I feel for you, and I've asked, I don't know how many times during my tenure on the board of, wait a minute, I'm lost in the acronyms because there are tons. We've tried to deal with some of that as a board with our open discussions, our forums, and we had one that is online that would probably be really good for you to go back if you're interested in it, specifically on some of the behavioral. And it's on the BCTV was there, and so it's on our Brattleboro Town School Board website. And it does go through and try to explain, and I actually asked the question, and Shelley walked through, I believe, what happens to, what's the behavior that we're looking at, what happens to the actual kid, what is the process? Because I always say, maybe I should use it at home. Well, it works here, maybe I should. But it's very well explained in that website. So if anybody is interested in that, that's probably a good spot to go.
I can give examples of the literacy PD we've offered. Is now not the right time? We work with an organization called Keys to Literacy in Raleigh, Mass. And we've had all our teachers trained in a program called Key Comprehension Routine. We've implemented a word level reading program at the elementary level, kindergarten through third grade, called Foundations. All of our teachers have been trained in Foundations. We've implemented an assessment system called Ames Web. All of our teachers have been trained in Ames Web, which is an assessment system. It is an acronym. I don't even know what it stands for, but it's academic indicator monitoring on the web. So, and those are the sort of the three big things that we've done for Literacy PD.
So, my name is Paul Smith. One of my jobs is actually sort of the math parallel of Brian's. One hat is as math coach. And I can briefly share some of the gains in mathematics that really parallel what Brian was talking about for literacy. Two statistics that I picked out. One, the overall percentage of students considered proficient based on the statewide math assessment increased by nearly 20 points from 2006 to 2000 to the last administration of the NECAP, which was the fall of 2013. And further to what Jill had spoken to earlier, low-income students went from about 10% below the state average to about 10% above the state average in that same time period. So again, this is a matter of bringing all boats rising, not bringing down scores in order to reduce the achievement gap. Okay? So one of the other hats that I wear is supporting implementation of the large-scale assessment system as it plays out in Brattleboro Town and the district. And one of the acronyms that was tossed around earlier was SBAC, S-B-A-C, and it stands for the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. That's one of two organizations that were funded by the federal government to produce a sort of what are being called next generation assessments, large scale assessments that are designed to determine student achievement of the new Common Core standards. So we had a new set of standards and a new set of assessments to go along with it. One of the ways that makes SBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, a next generation assessment is that it's not just a large-scale assessment flying in and landing somewhere in the school year and giving everybody takes the test and then it goes away. The whole idea is that it's a system of assessment. It includes interim assessment and, most importantly, support for formative, ongoing, daily, teacher-directed assessment to determine next instructional steps as part of the whole system. The tests themselves, both the interim assessment that can be given, doesn't have to be, can be given partway through the year, and the assessment at the end of the year, are computer adaptive. That is to say, a student answers a question based on the answer. The next question that comes at them either downshifts or upshifts depending on whether they've answered the question correctly. This is a vastly more efficient way to get information about student achievement standards than giving everyone the same assessment. Some kids can't even access it. Some kids blow it away. This system allows the testing software to really interact with a kid and much more efficiently, much more rapidly come to a determination of whether they're meeting the standards in broad terms. Okay. Any questions about that? Yes.
So my follow-up to that would be how are you determining what the number for each child means if they're all getting different assessment?
Essentially what it does is it finds a level for a student. So a student that does not answer questions well maybe is found to be at this level. A student that's answering some pretty high level questions may be at this level. And those are on a scale that's comparable not only within the test, but also the scale is designed to be comparable across years so you can measure growth over time.
The question I'm asking is sort of like how, if they're all getting different assessments, then you have no way of knowing how the data measures up from child to child.
Oh, no, you do. That's what's built into the system. Those questions produce score points. Those score points, the process, it goes through a process of, in the psychometric theory is item response analysis, that it's a process of looking at responses, looking at the kinds of questions that elicited those responses, and creating a scale so that every student's responses are mapped onto that scale, and that's a common scale for all students.
Based on grade level?
Oh yeah, within grade level, certainly a scale. The score that you get is the test that you get is based on the grade level that you're at. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
So it's like an eye test where the doctor just keeps putting new lenses until you can see like the
essentially,
right,
finds
yeah.
out
okay,
what
now
your,
you can see this line.
What your level.
Let's refine your, so you can standardize that across different people's eyes, but it is technically we're looking through different lenses.
Yes.
Thank you for the analogy.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Other questions? Okay, one more slide, and this is the happy student slide. So every year, across the district, students in grades 3 through 6 in the elementary schools are asked questions about the school climate, and we collate their responses, look at them over time. This is the most recent, this is last year's climate survey summary. We're about to administer another set of those. And this is just a set of questions that I pulled out that sort of give you a sense of the sentiment, as it were, in the schools. These are about 250 kids at Academy, about 90 kids at Oak Grove, about 157 kids at Green Street. And questions like, I feel like I am part of my school, 96%, 93%, 91%. I feel safe at school, 97%, 91%, 89%. So these are all questions that got extremely positive response from students. And we actually have seen those, many of these have increased over time since we've been giving the climate survey. And questions on that? Or thank you.
What about the other questions?
Yes?
What was the participation rate and how were these surveys administered?
So the surveys are administered usually online. There's a survey tool that we use. The rates of response are there, 250 kids, 90 kids, 157 kids.
In the town schools, it's grades 2 through 6. So it's really all of the students other than kindergarten and first graders.
You give it to them as a test. They have to take it.
As a survey.
And they have, and pretty much all of them take it.
Yeah.
I have a question. In general, how do you find the time, and the teachers find the time, to learn the new methods of literacy and math, and how is that built into their schedule? And the second question is, when you have a new teacher coming in, does the school system have like a mentor system? Some schools have really found this incredibly helpful for young teachers.
So we definitely have a mentoring program that Lyle coordinates, and that's really helpful. And as part of the mentoring, Brian and Paul will be part of the professional development for those new teachers. And we do have a cycle every year that we develop based on our needs within the schools of, so what schools need the literacy, the keys to literacy, section 2, and we have a rotation. We have 9 professional development days within the school year calendar, although not all of those 9 are used for professional development. Some are parent conference times. We use grade level meetings where through release time, teachers meet, all the second grade teachers meet, all the third grade teachers meet, and our curriculum people, our special educators do trainings with those teachers twice a year, and then follow up. And then teachers do professional development on their own in terms of coursework and workshops and that sort of thing. And we you know, there's a professional development resource that teachers can access, but they need to be, the work needs to be tied to our action plan goals, school-based goals, and also the supervisory union goals. So, you know, people have flexibility to do their own thing, but it really has to be tied to the initiatives that we're working on, and we get great results from the staff. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just looking at these numbers, and I know you put a positive spin on them. They all look pretty high, but I'm looking at 11% of students not feeling safe at school, and that sounds to me like that needs an intervention in a serious way. You know, so I guess it's just a, you know, when you look at these, are there things that you are seeing and you're thinking, gosh, only 82% of our students think they learn a lot every day?
Yep.
That could be a problem.
Yeah. I think these are good numbers, but it certainly shows the other side of it is that there's things that we continue to work on. We actually use the full survey with the middle school students that we, the last number of years we've had middle school leadership training, and we have students kind of process this with us and think about activities that are going to strengthen those numbers, and, you know, get the students involved with the analysis of this.
So one of the things we do, we do the survey, and every year, you know, we look at it as a faculty, and then we highlight, obviously, the areas that we're really strong in, and then we look at the areas that we want to get better in. And like, for example, it's not up there, because I think there's a total of 26 questions. This is a sampling of the questions. And one of the questions a few years ago at Academy, for all the kids, was students at my school are kind to me, or kind to one another, something like that. So it was like feedback on they feel other kids are kind to them. And that was one of our lowest scores. So we said, okay, as a faculty, so we have to look at that, and we came up with specific strategies to sort of teach kindness, and we saw over the next 3 years, every year, that kindness indicator went up. So the kids were reporting that they felt that kids were more kind to them, and so if you, when you do, so we use it to do that kind of work, and it, you know, and the kids are very responsive to it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks. You know, thinking about your demographics and your, you know, the poverty rate, and and just serving human beings, I'm imagining that, trauma and adverse childhood experiences are a big part of people's lives outside of and potentially, around the school experience. And so I'm curious about, I guess I'm curious about your philosophical approach to that. But within that, I'm curious about trauma-informed interventions, your rates of restraint and seclusion or hands-on, not seclusion, I'm sorry, I work in a different field, but restraint and hands-on approaches, I know you gave us some information on your positive behavioral supports and also the behavioral interventionists, but I'm less interested in the folks who are trained to work specifically with that and more in the school environment. And training for all folks around trauma-informed
That's a
intervention.
huge issue for us. We had somebody from the Burlington area meet with our leadership team, our principals, about trauma-informed schools, and it was really a great presentation. And, we want teachers to be able to access that professional development as well. I know, as an example, just one example, Mark Spino at Green Street has used the Nurtured Heart, a series of books where it's kind of a staff reading and then processing that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So over the course of the summer, I asked the staff to read a book. It's called The Nurtured Heart Approach, Building Inner Wealth in Children. So it's not necessarily focused on trauma, but it's creating a vocabulary and a system in your school where you're focusing on providing positive reinforcement to kids. So not always reacting to things that are happening, behaviors, but being proactive and having that positive interaction and building the inner wealth in our children and really getting to know them and establishing a relationship. So that's one of the things that we're doing as a school, Tier 1 wise, thinking about that.
What do you mean by Tier 1?
Tier 1, just like common language that we're all using and a framework that we're all going by. Then we also have situations where we have families in trauma, students in trauma, and we have teachers, paraeducators who are just looking for more information about how to handle those situations. And frankly, we don't have all the answers. We support each other by reading articles with each other, having discussions, bringing in folks like Shelley Wilson to talk to the staff, school psychiatrists coming in and meeting with us. But that's really demanding, hard work, emotional work that we face every day, and certainly is something that we recognize as a school we need to continue to put a lot of energy in, because we're just getting more and more families coming from tough situations.
So I know there were two people here. Did you have a follow-up to that point?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so let's Ted and then Peter.
Following up on this point, much of the presentation tonight has been about meeting standards and testing. And it looks like the schools are doing yeoman's work in proficiency in these fields. But there are a lot of things that are important for schools to impart that aren't really testable, like creativity or self-motivation or kindness. I loved your response there, Mark, to that. What programs and means are there that the schools are implementing in these other less measurable realms?
I think what we refer to it as social emotional learning, which is embedded in our curriculum. And so the things that we're measuring here are part of that.
So right before the meeting, Andy Davis, music teacher from Oak Grove and Green Street, had a presentation in one of the classrooms about a drama program at Oak Grove. So all three schools have active drama programs, for example, as an illustration. Here at Academy, we have three drama productions a year for students as low as second grade. We also have formed a partnership with New England Youth Theater where we did a 3-school production early this winter. We're looking toward doing, we hope, 2 with them next year. So drama has become a very viable and active and great program in the schools and in as a partnership with the New England Youth Theater. We also have an enrichment program. All students learn at Academy in Oak Grove. We have a grades 1 through 6 Spanish program. At Green Street, it's French. There are others, but I don't want.
With regard to the environment in particular, is there other programs?
So I'll speak a little bit to that. It also unfolds the trauma question about creating trauma-sensitive schools. So as an example, at Oak Grove, and I think this is different variations at each school, that PBIS that Jill says check out the website is great because it has positive intervention supports. And for example, Oak Grove School is be respectful, be responsible, be safe, and be kind. And we have 45-minute lessons every Monday on one lesson around that. And then those lessons are integrated into everything that happens during our school day. And kids get tokens for those things. It gets rewarded verbally in all classrooms. It's created a school culture that we value academics, but we value the person and being good citizens in a good community just as much. Of our staff, our faculty, we at Oak Grove we have 5 major committees that deal with different things. One of those is our climate committee that does PBIS. Everyone on that committee has done training on trauma, and we've brought that back out to our staff. We have counselors and behavior interventionists that work in the classrooms directly with children and with adults. Mindfulness trainings, we've done Nurtured Heart. I think all of us are really very aware of what our students are going through, and that there's no way we can educate them if they are not ready to learn, and that means social and emotional health. So that is a little bit harder to measure, and it's hard to show up on a slide, but that is a big focus that you'll see in all 3 schools.
If I can just add, in Head Start, we actually do measure the social emotional development with a tool called Teaching Strategies Global, and that's a tool that's used across the nation and very strongly in the state of Vermont. So we actually do some checkpoints along the program year 3 times. And our curriculum very much is sort of the baby steps of the PBIS model. We work on, as you can imagine, many of our families and children are dealing with trauma. And so we work on building resiliency with the children, and we do that through relationship building with the children and with their parents. And once we build that trust, it's really a launch pad then to be bringing in some of the other supports in the academic pieces. But we have significantly seen in the years that we've been measuring social emotional development, huge strides. And the biggest jump is from the fall until the mid-year. And then things kind of level off in the last third of the year, but that's because we're really infiltrating them with lots of support and strategies in that first initial impact in the beginning of the year.
So we had hands up from Peter, this woman, and then Bill.
Yeah, I'm interested in this slide. There are 10 feelings reflected there. I think Andy said there were 27.
About 26 in all.
Yeah, so there are another 16, 17. And I'm looking at Green Street being kind of lower pretty consistently. I'm wondering if the other questions indicate that same trend. If they do, well, what is that trend about? Why are those figures lower?
I don't have an answer for that, really. I don't think you'd find that with all of the questions.
Yeah, they go up and
They fluctuate.
I can speak a little bit. This is my first year at Green Street. One of the emphasis that we're working on is student leadership as well. So we've started some student leadership programs at the school. And to do that, we use information like this to have conversations with kids and to start developing those programs. Because I believe that student voice is really important, and to develop leadership skills and leadership programs with our students is a great way to help build community and climate.
I guess I'm wondering if the scores are related to poverty.
So, you know, and I respond, this is Mark's first year, and he's too modest to say, but, you know, Mark has stepped in, and at a time, I think, when some of the indicators were suggesting that Green Street wasn't on top in a lot of areas. And Mark has stepped in, I think he's really revitalizing it. He's addressing those issues, and I think you'll see over the next year or two that those indicators will be much more reflective of a very healthy, positive climate. They'll be going up.
I have a follow-up to your question about those scores. And I am a parent of 2 children who went through Green Street and had a wonderful education. I think whatever scores we put up there, there's a story behind the scores. And I'm sitting here looking at Oak and Green, and I'm seeing that it's consistently a few points behind. I asked several questions. Number 1, is there a difference in the way the test is delivered? And how does that feel for the Green Street family to see that their children aren't quite as at home and not quite as enthused about learning? What is the story behind those numbers in the reflections of the descriptions of the 3 schools now? An honest statement about the three schools. Is there a golden school here? Is there
It's me.
Because numbers which are dazzling, they hide other things.
Yeah, I think what Andy said earlier, that the staff, and this happens in all of our schools, that, you know, taking a look at those results, making sense of it, what does it mean to our school, having students involved in that discussion, and then coming up with strategies to address the concerns. I think that happens in each of the schools.
Does Green Street sit around and wonder why their students aren't quite as pleased with the product? Or do Oak and Green wonder what Academy's doing that is producing better scores?
I think in most cases, it's the school themselves looking at their own data as opposed to comparing it to others.
I would hope so.
Yeah, that's really
I don't
the
think
work.
this is particularly helpful.
No, I think it was just to give you a snapshot of results. And you know, I think if you saw all 26 indicators, I'm very proud of the results, really, when you look at it compared to other school districts. And in fact, the state is using this climate survey as part of their balanced accountability system to get other indicators other than the NECAP or the Smarter Balance test results.
I think we all are proud of those results, but by giving results such as this, you ask other questions.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how that affects the students in Green and Oak. And the faculty, and the teachers, and the principals.
Yeah, I think they focus on their results and celebrate the successes and look at the things that we need to really address and strategize and come up with interventions.
Well, I think such pictures as that may not be as productive as you hope.
We're gonna move that slide off. So we want to get on to the budget as well, but I know there was some, Dora, you had the question, and then there were a couple over.
I just want to get back to the issue of integration between subject areas, because what I've seen is that there's a lot more compartmentalization of the different subject areas, and talking about the drama, talking about the thing about kindness and all of that stuff. What I heard you say is that it's integrated in all the subjects for that day. But, you know, sort of, so what I want to hear is a little more about how things are integrated between subjects as far as what kids are learning between science and reading and all of that.
Well, I think what I heard Jen saying is that social emotional learning happens every day. And what I see is, especially with the standards that had been established in Vermont and now the Common Core standards that we're shifting towards, there's far more integration in terms of social studies and science and literacy and math than there had been in the past. So I think that is a good sign for us in terms of the work that we do.
Brian, the literacy coach, has worked with pretty much every third grade teacher in the SU on a an integrated science literacy unit on aquatic life. So when Brian's working with teams of teachers, actually you're doing one right now, 4th grade, right? When teachers just ask and Brian works really hard to get literature that fits into a science or social studies unit and then sits down and does the planning with the teacher, co-teaches the unit, so that we're always aware of trying to make that integration work.
But, I mean, you're right, and that's a great question, because that's been an issue nationally for a long time. And it's part of the impetus behind the Common Core, to integrate content. And it's one of our areas that we're pushing hard and that we have to grow in. So really, an integration of content. So for teaching writing, then we have kids that are actually writing science reports and science, things about science, and reading is starting to become much more, kids reading much more nonfiction. So all those content areas are integrated. So you're right, and we've begun the work, and we still have a ways to go.
Andy?
Yeah, just getting back to school enrollment numbers, I know that statewide, declining student population with budgets going up has created a kind of a political problem for public education in the state. And we're seeing a little bit of that here, but I'm wondering, public school is not the only choice, and there's a dynamic interaction and shifting of children between public schools, private schools, and home schools, parochial schools. Do we track at all the numbers? I mean, is the actual number of children slowly sinking, or we've only heard tonight that our enrollment in the public schools? How do we compare that with the actual number of possible children of school age? I'd love to know if those statistics are available.
We track our own students every month in the comings and goings of families moving in and out and that sort of thing. I think at one point we had an idea of the numbers of private school and parochial school students. I don't have that.
I mean, there was an article this week about how St. Michael's is moving back toward a high school. I know Hilltop has been growing. Their facility is growing, their population is growing, and I'm just wondering, what do we do as proponents of public education to learn when children leave the public schools for another setting? Is there any system for exit interviews, learning from those decisions? Any stories where we've actually adjusted things? I mean, I know as a teacher, when I see a student leave, I always feel bad about it because I feel like we provide a pretty amazing opportunity, but I know parents do make that decision. So just hearing the population of the public schools is only part of the story. I'd love to see it in context of what choices people are making in Brattleboro for educating their children.
So, I mean, and typically that's a struggle for communities in public schools, is particularly where you have a high percentage of students living in poverty, because we have to increase the services and the interventions that we're providing for those kids, and that's how we've gotten those kids to be able to read, and we've bolstered those interventions. We created after-school programming, and we've really strengthened those intervention programs. So it's a real trick to not spend all your dollars there. So we also have kids that are well above grade level, and then we have to reach up, and we want to push those kids and stretch those kids as far as we can. So it's very difficult to do both. And as we talked about kneecap data, how the top has improved as well as, and we're pulling up those kids from the bottom. But that's really difficult. That most school systems struggle doing that, and it's expensive. So 2 years ago, we asked for more money for our enrichment program. It's called BEAT, Brattleboro Educational Enrichment Program, and we've increased that now. We're We had one person that went between 3 schools, and now we have 2 people who go between 3 schools. That's not enough. We need to continue to look at that and try to figure out ways. How can we reach those kids who are above grade level? If we have a 3rd grade student who's capable of doing 5th grade math, then that's a challenge for us. How do we do that? How do you instruct a student at a 5th grade level in a 3rd grade classroom? But socially, the kid may be at 3rd grade, emotionally, so that's a real difficult challenge. And I wish I could say tonight I have the answer for it, but we struggled with that, and I had a meeting today with a parent, and a meeting with a colleague today about how do we address that in the future? How do we get better at that?
So we had some other people with hands up. Yeah.
Don't you need to know why people are homeschooling and why they're going to parochial schools and why they're sending their children some other place? I mean, you are public education. And we would want, I would hope, all of the children to go to these schools.
We'd like to know that, sure.
And there aren't ways to...
Well, in some
find
cases,
out.
through exit interviews, we get information. I think generally what Andy was saying is sometimes what we find that, parents may not be happy with their student's peer group, and they want to have a different group that they want their children to interact with.
So you...
As much as we can get information from parents, we do.
But there's a homeschooling group, so you could ask them how many children are being homeschooled.
Yeah, there's a homeschool application that we get from the state, so we get an indication from that as well.
And how many kids are going to this school? And
Yeah,
this
we
school.
know the numbers for homeschooling.
We also keep track of, it's easier to keep track of students that are in a school and leave to go, because we know where they're going. We can get that information. But we also, in the last 3 years, we've been getting kids from local private schools that have been coming back. And at Academy alone, because I track that information very carefully, we've gotten somewhere between 12 and 15 kids in the last 3 years that have come from local private schools, and they've come back to Academy, or they've come to Academy. So it does go both ways, and believe me, that's something that I actively think about. How can we get every one of those kids back, or every one of those kids to come to our school? How can we provide an environment that those parents will want? Because we do want to educate all the kids at Brattleboro.
In an effort to relieve your guys' suffering on this issue, this is a question that's been asked at this meeting at least the last 6 years. Every year it comes up. Every year I've come here, it comes up, and every year you guys say, we have no idea, we haven't asked this question. My suggestion to you and to the school board
Which question?
is to this question about about why parents are choosing not to send their kids to public school. It's an issue that's come up, and my suggestion is for you guys to figure out how to survey that and come up with an answer so that you can have an answer for this body that asks it every single time, because this same sort of struggling and trying to figure out how to answer the question happens every single year, and every year it's asked. So I would just, see if you can figure out a way to.
I know in the last 2 years, we come up with a monthly report that each of the principals are giving us, and they've always given us a report, but it actually has the numbers, and that's the homeless numbers are on there, the free and reduced lunch numbers, the numbers of the kids that are coming in, where they're coming from, and the numbers of the kids that are going out and where they're going to.
But doesn't address the parents who choose not to send their kids to public school from the
I'm not
beginning.
sure, Dora, how I go out and ask people.
They're not obligated to tell us. We can ask all day long, but if they choose not to give us that information,
I'm not
we're
sure how to
sorry.
get.
I'm going to keep us moving along here because we really need to spend a little time on the budget.
I have a question. It kind of ties into Andy's questions on the other end of that. If we have a reduced student population, which I think most everywhere in Vermont is the situation, we obviously are increasing the cost per student for education. do we have any plans in mind as to where we're going to go with this? Because obviously we can't go up with the budget every year and just raise the cost of educating a student. So I'm just wondering if there's been any thought given to where we go here at some point.
I think Jill's introductory comments were saying that we think about it all the time. We think about it during budget development, but also implementation. We think about it through attrition and reductions of staff that need to be made. We do know that the current numbers still have 16 to 18 plus students in every classroom. So it's not like over a period of time, if we lose a few students, that we can eliminate one section of classes, one strand of classes like at Academy, and just have 2 sections per grade level. It just doesn't work that way. But we, you know, as we get into the actuals of this budget, we can show you some of the things that we've really worked on to reduce costs and keep our per pupil spending pretty flat, and our overall budget decreased. And, you know, we need to keep doing that, and it's challenging. So Tad had his hand up, and we'll go this way.
There were a couple of high energy conversations last year that the school board had with members of the public around certain faculty issues. What was the outfall of that? What were the sort of the results that came from that process?
I'm not sure if I know exactly. I mean, the grievance hearing was very much public and reported as that went through, so I'm not sure what other that you're talking about.
We had community forums.
Yeah.
Right, we had community forums, but that wasn't necessarily on a staff. I don't know if I follow the question.
I remember attending one community forum at the co-op community room.
Yeah.
That was ostensibly around a faculty member, but it seemed like there were broader issues that were being raised around that.
So from that co-op meeting, we went back and Dave and I sat down, we were appointed to a committee, and we took every topic that had come up, wrote them on flip charts, we spent a lot of time on this, and then came up with the overall topics. And those are what we use to guide our community forums that we've hosted over the last, although we call this the 5th one because people were asking questions on money and budget. So this as well, obviously, is an exchange where community members can come in and ask questions. And so we've done them on the, now I'm going to forget, the first one I named them too, and I'm going to forget them all. The good stuff, and talking about all the different things that we do in the after-school programs and the extras beyond the stuff that you absolutely, you know, the reading and the writing. We did one on the positive behavior intervention systems.
And behavioral supports.
And then the
we did one on
testing.
assessment.
And the testings that have been done, and then on the budget. Those were the 4 main areas. And we've had different attendance at each time. People came through, and again, we've had VCTV has been at each one of those, and we posted them on the website so that people can see them there as well.
Okay.
A couple other questions, and then we're going to shift.
Oh, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. Following up on what Gary mentioned, I appreciate the fact that the board has worked hard to keep the budget reasonably level. However, the reality is that you're serving fewer children. And I think it's important to make adjustments to the budget that reflect that. I think that's what the community wants. The municipal center is consistently held to standards that I don't feel the school community is held to in terms of spending. And I'm coming at this from a business standpoint, but I just have to believe that there are ways to save money and lower the cost of education without sacrificing quality.
So I would ask that when we present the budget, you go over certain line items that we speak to that. because that's been the work of the board.
But when I look back, I go back a number of years, I take the number, I take the total budget line, and I divide it by the number of children that you have provided here, and we're consistently spending $1,000, $2,000 more, where it creeps up every year. And I think what you're not hearing from the community is that the community wants that to stop. And I'm not trying to pick on education, and I'm not trying to say it isn't important. It's very important, but I think we need to be really creative and really force the creativity to find a way to do this less expensively. That's what I hear people telling me as a representative. Well, that certainly went over like a...
I think, as I said, we haven't even had a chance to present the budget yet. And we'd like to speak about those particular questions and get into some line items and show you what we tried to do in those areas. So I can't answer that right now. I think the board needs to, when we actually shift into the budget and look at pages 1.
Right, but my point is that we have this conversation every year. And you're educating fewer children. What I'm looking for is more of a balance. These two things have got to come together a little more effectively. And that's what I don't see happening.
My question is not related to the most recent questions. It goes back to the survey questions, which you had up on the screen, that the students answer, how they feel about the school. And I noticed that there are selected questions. And there are more questions that were asked, I guess, that were not shown. And we've talked about why, we've wondered why students are taken out of our town schools and sent to some private school or wherever. And we'd like to know why. And I'm wondering what question that was not shown there that you feel is a powerful question and really tells you something, worries you the most as a board and as teachers? And is it conceivable that the answer to that question and others like it, which maybe were not so cheerful, could be an answer to the question of why parents decide to take their child out of that school? And let me just finish by saying that if on your exit survey, if that's what you have, if the question, why are you taking your child out of this school, is not asked, it will never be answered. That's all.
So I'd just say on the climate survey, I think it was just a representative group of questions.
Yeah.
There's probably 2 or 3 in every category that we just didn't want to have all up there. I don't think we would look at those and say, here's a question that's much lower than any of the others that would indicate an insight that you...
Right, I'm impressed with, I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing. It's wonderful. It's a sea change from when our boys went through Academy in Green Street. I'm just asking.
Yep.
And I would also like to ask, because we have had a specific question from Andy about how he feels when individuals do choose not to have their children educated in our system. We have a specific question from Gary about lowered student population without lowered costs. We have a very clear question from you, which states that, what are the answers to the questions? Dora says, for 6 years, I haven't been here for 6 years, on these committees, but why are people taking their children out? We certainly can find out how many homeschooled kids there are, how many there were last year. We can certainly address those issues, because that has a lot to do with how we possibly get together and answer extracurricular activities. If we don't have the information about the other choices that teachers, that parents are making, we don't have the full picture.
I guess I'd like to respond just a moment with that. And I can't really speak so much as a school board member as a member of the community with friends who have kids in public and private schools. I hear an assumption being made here, one that, and it was a question that Andy raised, but we don't have that statistic and that answer. Is the number of kids going down in our public school because they're going up in the private schools, or are both numbers going down? We don't know that answer. So I hesitate to make the jump that seems to be going on here, that means that they're being pulled out of here. The statistics that we've been watching as a board for the last year and a half, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but we aren't seeing them leaving to go to private schools.
Is Oak Meadow growing, perhaps?
I'm sorry?
Is the Oak Meadow homeschooling?
Our homeschool numbers are not going up.
So, and then I just speak just as anecdotally, which who knows what value that has, right? But the parents and friends of mine, for example, I have one friend who has one child here at Academy and one child at Montessori, and that she made that choice to split her kids because of the needs of the way her son learns and how he was interacting in a public school and how he wanted to learn. It fit him better to be in Montessori. And I have other friends that have had kids go to Montessori and again split their own families because of the way their children learn. And that was a decision that they made, and I've never thought of it as anything but a decision as a parent would make as, this is better for my kid. It wasn't that the decision was that this school was bad. It was rather that this is a different way of learning in a different environment, and we would prefer that.
So the total number of children in the state of Vermont has gone down in the last decade. And I don't have the numbers on my head, but that's readily available. But in the total number of children in the town of Brattleboro, I believe, has also gone down. From what to what, I don't actually know. But there's a trend of fewer children in our state. Just a point of clarification, very few students who go homeschooling or go elsewhere actually leave the school system and do that. They tend to start out of the system and stay out. I mean, they're ultimately. Just want to point out that we don't have kids that actually, leaving in droves, going to the private schools. That's a very small number. And actually, here, the number of kids coming in from private schools far exceeds the number that have gone out. And I have those numbers on with me tonight, but I can produce those if you like.
So I would ask that the rest of the board come back to the table and we can continue these questions, but I really hope that we have a chance to outline some of the budget more information.
Can I make a suggestion that next year at this meeting, we have less of the introductory and just get to the budget a little more quickly? Because this happens every year, like we hear all the great things about the programs, which I really like, but then we also sort of end up in these really long conversations that it might be less productive than just.
Good answer.
Could we also have a microphone next time so that we can hear when people are presenting something?
We should pass it around and really have somebody that just passes it to everybody and make the music for it.
Does it work? It worked, right?
They're working, Mike.
Yeah. It's working. Yeah.
Is it working?
Yeah, it works.
Hello?
I can't tell if it's working.
It's working. It's working.
Okay, I guess it's working, maybe?
Is that better?
So what we'd like to do is turn to page 132 in your town reports. We'll take a little time to talk about the revenue and expense budget summary, and I'm going to turn it over to our business administrator, Frank Rucker.
Okay, so page 132, as Ron has indicated, is a one-page summary of the budget proposal. Everybody find that page? Okay. So what this represents is, if you look at the mid part of the page there, total revenues, the use of funds. The proposal is $15,402,178. As Jill has indicated, that's down $55,000. If you drop to the bottom third of the page, you see the expenditure summary by major category. And again, the same number, $15,402,178. So the final statistic at the bottom of the page is an important indicator of our financial resources as we go forward. That's fund balance, reserves. Also, Jill had made some references to that. You can see we began the year with 1.186 million. There was 264,000 drawn from that reserve as a result of the fiscal year 14, which left this 922,000. In the current year, fiscal year 15, 500,000 of that reserve has been dedicated to the as a funding resource. So that leaves the 398,000 as of the end of 2014. Yeah. This light is low. I don't usually wear glasses, and I'm having trouble seeing. But Andy's got me covered, I think. So that's 3 years. That's fiscal year 14. What our resources are available for, to some extent, affecting the tax liability that we'll talk more about. We look at fiscal year 15, the current operating plan, and we're comparing the proposed budget of fiscal year 16 to the current plan, and that's, as we said, is a smaller budget by 55,000, or a 0.3% reduction. So, did we want a quick summary of the spending plan and then come back to the tax page? Okay.
So if you look on page 135 at the bottom, I'm just going to highlight sections that have pretty broad implications for the overall budget. So the bottom of 135, teacher salaries. So when you see that combined total increase, it's a 1.7% increase. So typically the teacher agreement, the master agreement, the last 3 years of our contract, I know this past year was a 2.5% increase. And so we've been able to reduce that through either attrition or retirements, and in some cases, some reductions. So that 1.7 is well below what we thought we would be at a year earlier. If you turn the page on 136 at the top, it has the paraprofessional lines. The total increase there is 87,344, but we have to look at, I think it's page 143, to see an offset on 143 under special education, where it has, it's just above the total towards the middle of the page, special education, see Schedule A. There's a reduction of about $79,000 in the para educators under special ed. So those two numbers offset themselves, the 87,000 increase versus the 79,000 decrease. So para-educator salaries are pretty flat in terms of the increase in this budget. I think, Frank, you were going to talk a little bit about some of the maintenance and...
Sure. Yes. Yeah, so as Jill mentioned, on page 142, we are experiencing some unexpected expenses associated with the hard winter. But unfortunately, we'll see a negative variance on that. Related to snow plowing, you can see that we did not substantially increase the budget in that area for fiscal year 16. But as we referred to earlier, the most significant reduction to the budget is in the area of special education. Page 143, we have that special ed, where we have the $553,000 proposal, represents the staff employed by the school district, down 78,000, and then we have the assessment for special education services, a few lines below that, down 400,000 as a result of changes in enrollment. You heard the administrators and others refer to the need. Deb gave you a good sense of what's around the corner. So we know that this is not a likely trend. This is, in this case, we know of a particular group of students that have actually just gone from 6th grade to the 7th grade. So they're still in our K-12 system, but that accounts for most of that reduction. We are likely to see cost pressure continue in special education in the years ahead. So those are some quick references. I thought maybe I would also just expand a little bit on the conversation around what Gary had raised and other folks were concerned about, the cost per student issue. We'll look at some of the mechanics of that when we turn over to the tax page, but in general, we're structured 3 schools with, as Ron described, grade level employment to serve. We try to serve between 15 and 20 students in a classroom. So for example, at Oak Grove, I think we have about 120 students.
No, oh, I'm sorry, yes, 130, sorry.
About 120, 130 students. So as an example, the issue around cost per student versus running a program. When we have grades 1 through 6 plus kindergarten, that's 7 grades. You have 120 students, that's somewhere around 17 kids per grade level. Go to a larger school, go to Academy. At one time we had about 420 students. Again, do the math, divide that by 7 grades. That's about 60 kids per class or grade level. We aren't going to have 60 kids in front of a teacher. So what's reasonable? 15 to 20. You divide 60 kids by 3. There's your 20. 20 kids per, what do we call that, a section? Okay, a strand. So the point is this is how we get from a disconnect between cost per student and what the principals have to address in terms of student need and just the general demographics. So we, as Ron pointed out, we haven't dropped below the bottom rung of those parameters. So what are we at Academy? Are we about 380?
376.
376. So that number, 376 divided by that seven grade, we're always going to be with 7 grades, is, what is it, 16 or 17,
So we have
18?
17.9.
So you see, this is the issue. The state has created a funding formula that responds to the minutia of 5 kids, 10 kids in an aggregate, and it has quite an effect on the tax rate. And I'll show you, I'll illustrate that to you. But your educators, they can't do a reduction in force for the 6th grade class when they've gone from 20 kids in that grade level to 17. Or 18, or 16, or 14. When we get toward 13 kids in a grade level, 12 kids, that's when there's an opportunity for a restructuring. That addresses the long term of how are we going to deal with this disconnect between a declining population and cost per student. So, and that's what Ron is saying, that's what the board has done. They understand these ratios. There's a handout that many of you might have that illustrates our student-teacher ratios at each location. So it's not an immediate, we don't have an immediate solution, but we certainly have done things to try to mitigate the impact. So there's, and one other statistic, as I came back to my computer, Andy was mentioning statewide statistics. About 10 years ago, we were 104,000 kids in the state of Vermont. Today, on the latest census, we're at 86,000. So nearly 20% decline statewide. And I know, having been in public education for many years, to the north of this system, just here since July, that the private schools have been extremely aggressive in trying to recruit students, just as the public schools are trying to do the best they can to serve and meet the needs of our community. So this is not a unique phenomenon, and in fact, I think Brattleboro has positioned itself very well in investing in an excellent system here at Brattleboro Town, but also at the high school. You have a facility that is going to serve the community very well in this environment of very competitive conditions. Yes?
One question. If I understand you correctly, the drop in the special ed part of the budget was primarily because the 6th graders are now in BAMS as 7th graders, is that right?
There is a group of students that had a particularly intensive need program that accounts for part of that, a significant amount of that.
Okay, well, what accounts for the growth in the para bump up of 15%?
When the budget's developed, the special education folks look at the individual education plans for all of our students. That individual education plan drives both the services and the staffing needs. So that there is a direct relationship between the types of disabilities that special education services are intended to remediate and the staffing plan. So it's the type of student that we know is coming to the system.
Yes.
Maybe another.
Disconnect there.
Yeah, maybe another piece of information, and we have to be careful about how much detail, but in this case, I don't think there's an issue in that The type of cost that is leaving Brattleboro Town System and going to Brattleboro Union is not related so much to staffing, it's related to a contracted service, a tuition cost. So that's probably why, if you're thinking employment is related to that number, one's going up, the other's going down, I can understand why you would ask that question. But in this case, what we have is a tuition expense leaving Brattleboro Town School District. But we're not seeing that, same correlation for employment. Okay.
Can I ask, where are you referring to that increased number?
Page 136 at the top, paraprofessional, total of 15%.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, that 87,000 increase, okay. Then if you go to page 143, in the middle of the page under special ed, it's got special education C, Schedule A. I'm not sure what that Schedule A means, but it's the $78,000 reduction. That offsets that other $80,000 increase.
I understand that. I just wondered why.
Because
why the special ed dropped.
Yeah, right.
It's a consolidation or the
Read it in the context of a contract.
Right.
For somebody who's got a special situation.
So more closely coding those staff members in regular ed positions than they were in special ed also had a factor in that. So are there other questions about what we've just spoken about?
Just about that?
Well, what we'd like to do is no, any of the expense items that you,
Okay, I noticed on page 130, you've added a third grade class, a .6 teacher position. What's happening in third grade?
So it matches out with the top of the next line of .4. To come up to 1, it's a teacher share this year. The top of the second column on the bottom of 130, you see that?
there's a 60% and then there's a 40%, so that's a job share between two staff.
So we
that's
didn't
the
add.
one.
So why did you split that up?
Because that's what the teachers are doing.
So,
Here's the microphone.
that's a third grade classroom, third grade classroom position. And so it's one full-time equivalent, but it's being shared, split by two teachers, one at 60% and one at 40%.
Because that's what they want to do.
Well, it's a proposal, one is for family, have a young child.
No, that's fine,
Yeah.
I just wasn't,
Yeah. Right, so it's still one position, but it's just two people sharing it, job share. We actually have two of those in the school right now.
Can I keep going?
Yes.
On page 137, under instructional equipment, there's dramatic increases there, and I'm wondering, in the narrative about Oak Grove, I think it said they were giving every child something or other. So is that what's driving that?
So if you look at instructional equipment, you'll see that I didn't have a replace instructional equipment line item. Sorry. If you look at it, Oak Grove and Tursley has not had replace instructional equipment. We've only had a instructional equipment line item. So this is to do things like chairs and desks. So for example, I replaced third grade chairs. It took me 3 years because it's about $3,000 to replace one classroom set of chairs, except you pay almost as much in shipping each time. So what I did, and with Frank's support, is I don't have a replace instructional equipment line item for Oak Grove, and I don't have the non-instructional equipment. So I had to balance those numbers out. So I have $3,000 up from $500 because I never had enough money to buy a set of chairs. So no, it's not the equipment as far as technology is concerned.
that's strictly furniture, things like that. I've just been, the budget has neglected to have that for Oak Grove for a number of years. That was kind of long-winded. I want chairs, sorry. Apologize. Did I answer that? I talked a lot, but.
Well, I didn't follow the part about how you haven't had the
So if
line
you-
item before that.
So if you look at instructional equipment, in the 2014-15 budget, 2013-14 budget, I've had $500 in each of those line items. And if you go down to the next place, it says replace instructional equipment, which is how the other schools have replaced prevailing equipment like chairs or tables or, physical equipment that has fallen apart, desks for the teacher, things like that. So I haven't had enough, because I've only had $500 and I haven't had the replacement line item, I haven't been able to pay for things like furniture in the last few years. So the increase is actually to try to get me up to speed so I can do one set at a time and not waste money on shipping and handling. Like that. Better the second time.
Could you use the mic, please?
On page, hang on, 141, I have two questions about electricity and fuel oil. Last year, we approved an article on Evergreen and an article on the heating system. And I noticed that these figures haven't changed at all, and I'm wondering why these expenses haven't gone down.
Okay, I'll try to address that. On the heating project, or heating fuel, it will affect the $50,000 academy line item toward the bottom of the page. And as you point out, it is the same dollar figure as the current budget. That project is expected to be bid, we're hoping the first week in April to have responses to bids from vendors to complete the project in this coming summer.
You might want to mention that it was delayed because of
Yeah.
local costs.
Yeah, so just as last May, June, this project, the same project, was put out to bid, and the bid was not awarded because the results of the bid were higher than the resources available to complete the project. So we're at it again, and we didn't want to presume that it would go forward and then have that same potential result and be short on resources. But I am confident that it's going to be competitive, and we may have support from the Clean Energy Development Fund to help with that cost. On the electricity, I did speak with Jim Kane briefly about that Green Mountain project. I did read the town report, I read the minutes. He had indicated that the vendor that had the proposal withdrew the proposal for the lighting efficiency retrofits, but it is something I intend to pursue again. I'm assuming it would be with the assistance of Efficiency Vermont. But again, it's something that we didn't want to presume until we had something in place. Yes? We have a question?
Thanks. So I'm wondering if you can explain the increase of $10,000 for the Green Street Playground? Is this working?
You have to hold it right to your mouth.
Say it again.
Can you explain the increase of $10,000 to the Green Street Playground maintenance, and also explain why it costs so much to maintain Green Street and Academy grounds? Looks like one of mine.
What page?
I'm sorry, it's page 142 at the top, grounds maintenance. Got distracted by the microphone.
In terms of the playground structure, that line item, we are hoping to replace a full structure
out on our playground. The total cost of that structure is about 20 grand. Budgeted 10,
And planning to resource the rest of that with PTO money that's been earned.
raised over the years.
Frank, you might not be aware, but the Wyndham's Solid Waste Management District is just this week awarding a contract to put up about a 15 to 30 acre solar panel array at the Solid Waste District, the Cap landfill. And the credits from that are available to district, town, municipalities, school districts. And that could lead to high 20% reduction in electric costs for municipal governments.
Yes, and I am aware of that. The Brattleboro Town Board had moved ahead a year ago with a photovoltaic net metering agreement with Next Sun Energy. And the Brattleboro Town school districts are receiving credits right now under a 20-year agreement. So that is underway, and it is another reason to revisit the budget, hopefully meaning lower costs for our following year plan.
So is the Next Sun array meeting all the school districts' needs?
It's doing just the Brattleboro Town, and which includes EES.
Okay.
It's not doing the whole entire.
The mic is not working.
The mic really, I think we all just need to yell because the mics are not working for.
They're not working.
Maybe we need to put them in the budget.
Remember the old enunciation classes you used to have? Public speaking. This lady and this lady?
Page 137, under counseling, the salary is $216,000. How many personnel is that?
3.4. So at Academy, it's 1.4 positions, and then at Oak Grove and Green Street, 1 position at each school.
On at Monday's meeting, we were delighted to know that the select board was able to negotiate a $1.99 cost for fuel oil for next year. Is the town going to take advantage of that good price also?
I would just like to comment that it's our business administrator that obtained that reduced price and then involved the town, asked them if they wanted to be part of that. So yes, we are seeing that result.
So we led the way.
Yes.
So that's good news for both of us.
It
It
is.
is. And it's $1.97.
He knows that.
Andy.
This is on the continuing change of how special education is in the budget. I'm going back to page 132 in the summary. And I know that last year there was a big change where special education was moving over to the district level. So I'm just wondering, we still have, if someone could just explain the mechanics of there's still in the budget under special education local about $500,000, 550, almost 554,000 that's labeled local.
Yeah. So
is that eventually going to move over to the?
Probably
Could you
not.
talk about the distinction
Yeah.
between the district transfer and assessment and the what's called term labeled local?
So the WSESU special ed assessment, the large number, 2.4, with the reduction of 470,000, that's the certified staff. That is part of the supervisory union by state law. That needed to transfer into the SU. So you'd still get, Brattleboro Town as well as every district gets an assessment based on their needs. The good thing about this is Frank talked about the some of the students moving on to save costs, but also flexibility of staffing too that's helped us reduce costs as well. The number above that, para-educators are still funded in their local district budgets. So that's essentially the para-education, and I'm not sure if there's any other, but that's the bulk of it.
Yeah, so the local is the paraeducator budget, and the reason for keeping them in the local budget is it is not unusual to assign a variety of general education duties along with special education, and the state is very particular about an eligibility requirement. For the teacher, it's less likely because of the more specialized training and the professional skills. So that's why there's the
They may have
distinct.
playground duty and things like
Right.
that. That's purely special education.
That's right.
And it's not
Thank you for
specific to
that.
their certification as a special ed teacher.
No, that was an example of a clear question and a clear answer. Thank you.
Yes.
I have two questions. So my first question is, what is going on with the unemployment number? The first line item on page 135. I mean, it looks like it's consistent with the actual from the actual numbers, but the budget. I'm just curious about why we're, it looks like you're budgeting for it this year, which is different than past years, which is probably increasing the budget a little bit, which is probably a good thing. In terms of budgeting for it. But if you could speak to that. And my second question was, if somebody could just speak to the specific areas where, because of reduction in students, it sounded like you had said that there were some areas where you really did look at reduction in costs in relation to reduction in students. I'm wondering if textbooks is one of that area, if there's other areas that you're able to highlight where that did actually happen.
So you want to talk about the unemployment cost?
Sure, the unemployment, your observation is correct in that we did match the actual, the fiscal year 16 budget of 15,000 it's still less than the fiscal year 14 actual of 16,132. But as we noted earlier, we do have some reduction in the special ed paraeducator area. Any kind of reduction in staff creates those sorts of claims. And then in terms of general cost reductions, we did look at every line item in the budget, and where there was an opportunity to reduce, you do see a number of negative variances throughout the budget. So we start, of course, with our largest costs, and we try to project. That goes back to the student-teacher ratios, and if we cross that line where we're underutilizing staff, then we make those changes. As far as program changes, I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on areas where you do see the negative numbers, the reductions there. As I say, there are several throughout the document.
So a couple of areas, on page 137, the textbook supplies, just thinking that what Academy had purchased and implemented in terms of their programming seemed like we could save about $5,000 this year. If you look down later in the page, itinerant staff, that probably had more to do with some retirements and turnover of staff, hiring younger staff. So any of those types of things, as Frank said, we look pretty closely. Program improvement on page 138, we felt like looking at the actuals, we could make a slight reduction. Throughout that whole category. Library salaries, again, I think that was through retirements and changes there.
Was the secretary salaries also retirement?
Yeah, no, that was actually, there was a part-time secretary that actually is doing more special ed coding of services, and we assigned it to a special ed category because it complied with the job description.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
On page 143, the change in the computer equipment at Green Street, is that a effort to bring things up to speed, or is it something new and different?
No, effort to make it equitable.
It's an effort to increase technology resources for students at Green Street.
Andy?
I'm curious, legal fees, there's only mention of legal fees that I can find in the budget, page 135, under school board administration.
Yep.
$15,000. Is that the only place that legal fees related to employment or any kind of disagreement, that's the entire?
Yep.
Is that like a fixed fee, or is that an estimate based on
It's an estimate.
hourly?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the actual 2013-14, it was a little over 13,000. So it's kind of a plug-in figure, and
But that's there's no other legal.
that's it. That's a whole.
it. Are there any settlements that have ever, do they appear in the budget if there's ever, I'm just thinking historically, not any specific case, but if there is a settlement, does that appear in the operating budget, or how do we have insurance?
Yeah.
If there was a lawsuit or something like that, how is that handled?
Let me just answer the legal fee numbers, and then we can go into a little bit more detail. So that legal fee figure includes negotiations with a legal firm that would, has a retainer for X amount of money, and then any other outside of that legal fees that may come up through personnel matters. I'm not aware of any settlements, but we have insurance to support that.
Yeah, so that is, if there was a claim and it was awarded, you wouldn't see an expense to the school district because it's part of the premium that's paid each year for commercial property and liability, and that is in the building section of the budget, page 140. You see property liability insurance. We level funded it at the $133,000 level.
That's an expensive premium. And that covers not only physical issues, but employment disagreements or things like that.
That's right.
Contractual.
General liability, yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Wheeler?
This is really minutia, but I'm intrigued. On page 135, under district-wide, fresh fruits and vegetables. We didn't budget anything for the 2014 year, but we spent some. We didn't budget any for the current fiscal year, but we do have some for that we're going to be voting on. Could you just speak to that? What's happening?
I have a facetious comment for you, which is making kids eat vegetables, but there's an actual, answer. Some grants have been budgeted and others have not. And I am trying to make sure that we have all of the programs in. And there is a revenue source. Did you note that as well?
No, I didn't.
Okay, yeah, so it does appear that it's an increase, but in fact, when you look at revenues, it is within the state grants. So we don't have all of the detail on page 132, but it is just no effect on the tax rate. It's new revenue in and new expense.
So based on the tax rate.
Go ahead.
On 132, back to the fund balance, the town discusses having about 10% of the total budget, and this looks like you got quite a bit less of a balance. What's the plan with that?
Frank had that same point to us. That was exactly his point.
Is there a plan to restore that at some point?
We liked it when it was higher, but we realized that when we were putting this budget together, that if we did it any higher, it's going to bump up taxes more. So we had to make a, yeah. And I think that leads to an important question about the, on page 133, unless you have something before that.
No, I can, we could transition to an overview of the tax rate that Joe alluded to, because the reserve is a significant part of how we stabilize the tax rate. So if you like, I can describe that now, if the body's interested. Okay.
So 133, page 133.
Okay. Yeah, page 133 is a document that the Agency of Education developed as a result of the legislative directive that said this will be published, and this is the public's presentation of the school funding formula. So I will take a first pass at this, just because I know you've been here for a couple hours, and I'm happy to go into as much detail as you want, but my first pass will be fairly cursory. The state starts with a few statistics that are prescriptive. And to draw your attention to that, it is line 32 is a very small print that says $1. You may have heard this in the news. It's the statewide property tax. So the governor and the tax commissioner announces that rate. School boards, school administrators start working on budgets and understanding tax impact based on that rate. That rate is if you look over the prior years, you can see it's changed. It's $1 proposed this year. They're considering changing it right now in the legislature, but that's what we have to work with. You see it's 98 cents in fiscal year 15, which means that the state is passing a 2-cent raise on property tax just because that's their assessment of what's necessary. You look at the prior year, it's 94 cents, and the prior year before that, it's 89 cents. Okay? So that's right out of the box, right out of the gate, a driver of your tax liability, irrespective of what the school board is planning to do. The second number that comes out from the Department of Education or the tax department is a couple of lines above that. It's under this line 27. It's a small number that says based on 9,459. It's just two lines above the dollar. Okay, and it's also unfortunately the state's font, super small print. 9,459. Another number that's announced, we don't have anything to do with it. We don't control it. And it has a direct impact on the tax rate. So we'll now start talking about what we have an effect on the tax rate. That would be the first number, the proposed budget, 15,402,000, line 1. That's down 55,000, as we've said. This formula is it's actually pretty simple math. There's just a number of variables that there's a pretty good volume of statute that says how each variable is calculated. But here's the funding formula. We take what we are proposing to spend, we subtract revenue. Revenue such as our reserve. That's why that's a relevant resource, very relevant resource when it comes to talking about a tax rate. But in this case, we're proposing a budget of $15,402,000 for your consideration on Saturday. Of that, $2.6 million, that's $2.613 million, is not money we need from the tax source. That goes back to the prior page, the revenues we glanced at. So $2.6 million is coming from things like $520,000 from the Title I grant, $1.7 million in special education reimbursement, $104,000. I'm just looking at the big numbers here. $104,000 Medicaid subgrant. Okay, so that's money that we do not need to ask the taxpayers to fund. It's grant sources, it's other sources of revenue that are not tax. related. We're almost done with the calculation. It's 15,402,000 in spending. That's what the board controls. Subtract that revenue that we have available to us, and we have a net number on line 15 of 12,788,000. The funding formula says we're going to go to a cost per student formula to create a tax rate. So it's 12,788,000 divided by our equalized students of 821. Maybe we'll talk about equalized students later if you're interested, but that is another defined term by the state. That's our cost per student from the state funding formula point of view. 12,700,000 divided by 821 students, $15,573. I started the discussion with the state statistics of $1 and $9,459 because that's the last piece of the funding formula. What we do is we take our spending, $15,573, and we divide it by that state statistic, $9,459. And that is a ratio. And that ratio is published right there, 164%. So 15,007 is 164% bigger than the state statistic of 9,450. We multiply that number by the statewide property tax, which I mentioned is $1, and that's your tax rate. That's the way all schools in Vermont calculate their tax rates. And so this helps us also kind of illustrate when Andy at Oak Grove is dealing with a sixth grade level class of 60, and he divides that by 3, so he's got 3 sixth grade teachers, and that grade level cohort goes down to 55. You divide that by 3, you're not probably going to lay off one of those teachers. And you do the same thing in Green Street, you do the same thing in Oak Grove. We do this same thing across the whole state of Vermont. That's why we have had cost per student rising, and yet public school is not paying much more as a percentage of state GDP than we did 20 years ago. It's about 5%. So the state has created a funding formula mechanism that is disconnected from programs. We still have to run a sixth grade, whether we have 21 kids in it or we have 17. And then the magnitude of that, when we get back to taxes, is for every 10 students that we either gain or lose, that's the equivalent of $150,000 in this funding formula. It's the equivalent of us having to, if we lost 10 students and we didn't want to pass $150,000 impact in the tax rate to the taxpayer, that's the equivalent of a penny on the tax rate. We would have to reach into a reserve if we have it and use it as part of that revenue source that I described. So if you have the reserve, you happen to be in a period when there's an unusual dip in enrollment, then the board has the opportunity to stabilize the tax rate. If you don't have a reserve, then you don't have that option. And just one more point, and then right now the state legislature is considering a bill that says that we will cap these statistics. So again, if you have a reserve, you can apply that reserve, and you can manage your programs over a 2 to 3 year period instead of an immediate. We open up the envelope from the state of Vermont that tells us how many our equalized students are in December, and that is the immediate calculation on the tax rate. And so many of the variables are not under our control. So that's the argument for having a reserve, and I think a 10% reserve is excellent given the way these statistics change from year to year. We are unfortunately only at a $300,000-400,000 reserve, so we're a third of that, but at least we have one. So that's the quick version. Just 2 more points, and then maybe questions. And that is, School tax rates are by district. You know, we have half of our students in the BUHS district. So the last piece of this document, which we don't need to get into the details of unless you're interested, is simply the weighted average. The Brattleboro Town tax rate that we are proposing is the $1.64. And if you're about, you can see line 29, you're 51% of that. So 51% of that is 85 cents. We do the same calculation at the high school. Whatever their tax rate is times the balance, 49% of the kids are there, is added to the 85 cents to get the total tax rate. So there's questions.
So the fund balance has an essentially different role than in the municipal budget. We've just been having a discussion with the town manager about the role of the unassigned balance for the town budget. For the school districts, it really is to equalize taxes from year to year and not to save a rainy day fund for some unexpected 500 students show up in town. So there's a little more, we don't deal with things like collapsing retaining walls and things like that. So fortunately. So is that a good way to sort of see that? It serves a different function if there's a...
It does to some extent. On the other hand, we will be developing a more definitive capital plan, a 5-year capital plan, and so the reserve, from that point of view, is also, it serves the same purpose. But the municipal budget is like the schools used to be in 1996 and prior, in that the municipal budget is very straightforward in terms of its calculation. Whatever the grand list is, whatever that annual budget is as a proportion of the grand list, is your tax rate.
You don't have the state calculations on top of the local.
In the school environment, since 1996, the grand list is completely irrelevant. It doesn't come into the calculation.
Is there a capital budget this year?
The capital budget is, you can see the kind of the legacy of it, where you were reviewing on page 141 under fuel. At the tail end of the maintenance budget, it's actually on 143 under debt service. So the very last group of expenditures under debt service. You see that? Page 143. So that's the result or the legacy of your capital investments, and I do want to create a schedule so that it projects the future. We do have a lot of studies, assessments of each building, and a estimated cost. It hasn't been organized in a schedule that was ready to be published, but I'm glad you mentioned it just because this is a significant area of investment. You can see we have $442,000 being invested in the capital plan, and it's been at that level for several years, which is a good sign that you're not waiting for your building to crumble and then have to rebuild. But you have some significant commitments that are just about to mature. The biggest one is the bond that was sold in 1994. It's the last payment is this proposed budget, $221,000. So that begs, those systems are 20 years old or more. It's time to replace those. We need a capital plan that continues somewhere along that level of investment.
So, can I understand you to say that if you had some kind of emergency spending, a $25,000 roof problem, you would expense that as opposed to taking it from the reserve?
Yeah, by law, we have to we have to operate within the general fund voter approved budget. So in this case, 15,402,000, and school districts are obliged, unless there has been a capital reserve fund set aside, and I'm not sure, I haven't done my homework yet to know if we did that in the past 10 years or not. I know the high school did, but I don't know if we have a capital reserve fund or not. But if there was a public vote in a town meeting article to create a capital reserve fund, then a board can always disperse as long as it's related to capital improvements. But as far as I know, we haven't done that yet.
Frank, I don't think I understood your response to Andy's comparison of the reserve fund balance for the school district versus the town.
So there's one case of similarity in that schools have lots of assets, primarily buildings, and those assets need, or it's beneficial to have reserves when you know a roof, a heating system, a parking lot, could be a bus if you own it, we contract it. We have those capital assets, we know the useful life, and it's in the community's best interest if a reserve is created to offset and fund the useful life in the future, but it relates to the current operating budget. Each year, if you see expenses in the future that are going to be incurred, your operating budget has to appropriate money to fund the reserve. So that's very similar to the town, whether it's a grader or a road embankment or some other type of major community investment that needs a funding source. What is very different, though, that the town does not deal with is the irregularity in the basis in which their tax rate is calculated. The basis for the town tax rate is the grand list, the town's grand list. So for using simple numbers, if the grand list was $1 million and the town came in with a budget of $1 million, the conversation around setting a tax rate is simply 1 million divided by 1 million, the tax rate's $1. In the next year, if the town proposed a budget of 500,000 and the grand list is still $1 million, then the tax rate's going to be 50 cents. It's that simple. With the school district, the calculation of the tax rate is based on the 5 variables we talked about, of which the school has no control, and you can't even predict them because they're not even disclosed until a couple of weeks before we need to go to publish a budget. So there's that uncertainty around the effect of spending and your revenues available as it relates to the tax rate. And that's where a reserve is very helpful to stabilize it. Town doesn't have to deal with that element at all.
Mr. Wheeler.
I'm sure everybody's getting tired, so it would be foolish to try it at this point, but at some slow point in your year, could you teach a little hour-long course on this? I would be interested. I don't know if anybody else would, but.
So when it's scheduled, we'll be on the list as well.
Okay, thank you. No, seriously. I mean, we've been living under this for years, and I've always understood it was difficult. It's pretty straightforward.
Until you get into the details.
But we didn't even deal with the equalized pupil, which is a whole nother part.
I was going to ask, and I said, no, it was late.
So I did want to respond to Mrs. Wheelock, right? Your question earlier, I don't know that we adequately really responded to. It was, the statement that you made was that the board is not necessarily responding to the town representative's claim and request of let's look at the number. Exactly, but voiced through the town representative. And we've sat there, and most of us on this board for several years and watched that. I know I have, and we've discussed it. And I do want to draw back attention that we did start with that this year, and Not that we haven't in other years, but we started with that request to make it as level service, level funded, level taxed. Those are three different things, which they keep hammering at me, reminding me of. We asked for it. What does that look like? And again, still at the same time saying what is necessary out there. I mean, I think they've shown really clearly some of the stuff that goes on in this town that we're probably not all aware of, that comes into the school and the needs that have to be met. So we wanted to hear all of that, and we've walked through, and so it's this balancing act of how do you be responsible to the taxpayer and be responsible to the children and the needs, and to break the cycle of poverty, and how do we do that? I feel like we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit, that we did come in with a budget that's below what we've had for a budget before. As we all just listened to Frank, we can't control the final number that's going to come down from the state. Have we done enough? Is there another creative way to look at it? We're working on that. This is a joint effort. Yeah, the numbers go down. We say, but what needs to go? And Frank's making it very clear. Just because you lose 2 kids, 10 kids, whatever, you can't just close a whole school. I mean, we've done some of that just for fun. Let's see, how much does it cost per kid for the librarian at Oak Grove, and how much does it cost for the librarian at Academy? But is that the right way to look at it? Does that make the right sense? Is that how you're going to be able to balance the budget and move things around? How much, when you come down to looking at it on a per kid basis, it isn't always as clear as I was hoping it was too when we started.
Well, what I'm trying to say, and apparently not doing a very good job of it, is that I think you need to tip the balance a bit to the taxpayer. It's been consistently tipped in the other direction. And politically, I think it would be to your advantage to make some cuts that you don't want to make because people want some relief. That's what I'm trying to say.
So we started that this year, and we thought we were in line with that, but the way the state formula comes, it doesn't work out.
Well, I'm talking about just the part that you control.
And we did control it, and we did decrease it this year. It's not millions of dollars of decrease, but it was a small decrease. It's a small step, and we continue to talk about it with attrition, and there's been some changes, and we keep looking at it. It is a thing we constantly struggle with. The need is also increased.
Yeah, just the other side of that is, this is the country we live in. You know, health costs go up every year. Just scanning through, I think you guys said 4% total. I didn't see a total number there, but that goes up. Teacher salaries has to go up. The value of money goes down. This is how it goes. So the fact that it's level at all is clear that, you know, you're pulling from the children in favor of the taxpayers.
Right, that's what I started with. Just the idea of a level funded means that you're cutting something.
I totally see that.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment in light of the feedback and everything tonight. My child went through this school system, hi Andy, and I've also worked within the school system. And what I see is all of you constantly squeezing water from a stone and somehow miraculously overall creating a thriving, open, upbeat environment for our town's greatest assets, our children. And I know what you're up against. I know what teachers are up against as far as what they have to do these days with multitasking and other challenges that they never had to before. And I just personally want to thank everyone in the Brattleboro school system.
Welcome, Mr. Rucker and Mr. Spino. It gets better than this.
Did you have one more too?
I just want to add to that sentiment and say that just quickly scanning through the budget, and since I've been looking at it, you know, there's not a lot of padding. You know, I mean, we're talking about $3,000 to replace one classroom of chairs. So, and I would love to hear more from others if others have a more educated perspective on where there may be, I mean, but we're talking cutting dollars, not thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars if we're talking about, I think, cutting that. So yeah, I want to echo the same sentiment in general. I mean, it's not a huge budget generally to be able to provide those kinds of services. So I appreciate what you do to try to figure out how to do that.
And we heard that there's fundraising through the PTOs for playground development.
And I think the bottom line for me is that we also heard of some great results. And we, I mean, we're not just here to look at the numbers, but we're here to actually educate the kids in the end. And we have very specific, very clear results that are happening.
I would just make a suggestion about your report next year, and is to include the narrative that you provided here tonight. It might save some questions as to where things are offset or why something is up so much or down so much. Just like a one-page kind of thing, nothing dramatic. And we like those questions that you ask the students, so we can look at all of those too.
We're guaranteeing we'll bring back all the positive things that happen over next year. Did you have one more comment?
Oh, I was just going to say, can we put some money, can we get some money somewhere for mics?
I think we have to learn to hold the mics. I think they
For
work.
the aging population.
Batteries.
So upon that, I think I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.